hearing?
That's weird.
I can't
We're going to be here a long time because it hasn't changed in the half an hour I've been here, so. All right. I now call to order the regular meeting of the Leominster Conservation Commission for September 10th, 2019. Our first hearing is continued pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40 is amended to be a public hearing to consider a notice of intent by Mark and Deborah Giovannucci. All right. By Hannah Giovannucci for the demolition of a 1.5-story home and failed septic system. This also includes construction of a 2.5-story house with a sewer service connection via a suspended insulated line from the existing bridge that will be raised. This will be over an inland resource area, including a shrub wetland and intermittent stream. The project includes associated driveway, grading, utilities, and landscaping improvements within a 100-foot buffer zone. Address is 644 Pleasant Street, Assessors Map 406, Parcel 1C, DEP 199-1096. Do we have someone representing the applicant?
They all have that name.
That would be me, Hannah Giovannucci, professional engineer. And I also have with me Chris Anderson with Hannigan Associates, engineering. Sorry about that. So you did a very good job summarizing the project. I guess we'll just dive right into the continuation of the hearing. So last time we talked about the existing conditions and notes on the existing conditions. Hannigan Engineering updated those plans, and I think you may have those right now. And so it was just those notes that were modified, and nothing had to do with the actual plans itself, so therefore the site development plans were not updated, and none of the design was altered as a result of them. So now, going into the definition of the stream, whether it's intermittent or perennial. So first of all, I looked at that Mass DEP comment from Judy Smith, and I called her just to confirm how a perennial stream is defined. And she said it was strictly between that A, B, and C. And so from there, I decided to communicate with Hannigan Engineering and also Karen Environmental. And if I could bring Chris Anderson to help explain.
Sure. So for the record, Chris Anderson with Hannigan Engineering. Like Hannah had previously said, I know there was a lot of discussion during the previous hearing regarding whether or not this was an intermittent or perennial stream. So at our office, we took a second look at everything just to confirm. So I'm sure the Commission is very much aware. The general process is you look at the U.S. topo maps. Unfortunately, those topo maps were made back in the early 1900s. Things have changed and whatnot like that. But the regulations say that if it's marked as a dark blue line within the topo map, it's considered a perennial stream. If it's a light blue, it's an intermittent. Per the USGS topo maps, there's no line on the property at all. We acknowledge that there may or may not have been some kind of diversion at some point in time, but there's no record of that. So that was our first step. And just to confirm and keep our sanity with us, we decided to take a look at stream stats, so the next step down. So as stream stats, you look at it, and I have copies of the stream stats that the Commission would like. You look at the locust property, the watershed that associated at that point, as seen in the property, is only about 0.05 square miles. We have to hit a threshold of about half a square mile, or even be considered a perennial stream. So by default, just by stream stats, we're not a perennial. We took it to the next step. We looked at the topo maps. When you look at the topo maps, there's a defined bend in the perennial stream that's mapped on the U.S. quad maps. So for the sake of argument, we reviewed that watershed per stream stats the same. It only came out to be 0.3 square miles. So cumulative property, if it was diverted, you're still at 0.35. So by default, we're still not even nearing that perennial status. So at that point in time, it's kind of dead. Chuck Karen with Karen Environmental also reviewed the similar process that we did and came up with the same results. If the Commission would like, I can hand out some of the quads and everything like that just to show the pretty picture and explain the methodology, or if there's any questions regarding that, I can answer them as well.
Questions, comments? Can I see that?
first one I'm going to hand out is the quad map, or the stream stats report, directly associated with the property itself. So on this one, I like this one. So under this stream stats report, you can see that the overall watershed is only 0.05 square miles, so nowhere even remotely close to half a square mile. This next report is as if we were to look at the potential diversion point along, I think it's not Anthony, it's like Tiffany or something like that, road. With this watershed delineation, we only have about 0.31 square miles. And if you look at the delineation between the two, they pretty much match up if you include them, interpolate between the two watersheds along the roadway system in the subdivision. So you still don't quite hit it, even if we were to presume that the watersheds were combined, if you will. But all this is kind of mute because you have to look at what the topographic maps say. And per the maps, even in the old and the new that Ms. Giovannucci had found online through the USGS, there's nothing marked there. You can see a potential saddle, a high point between the two valleys that create both stream beds, if you will. I use stream beds lightly. You can see the saddle between the two, but there's nothing that comes off of that per the maps. So if it was done, even though it's not mapped, right off the bat, we're not not required to meet the riverfront standards. But even by doing the watershed analysis, you're still nowhere near that level. I can pass around the U.S. topo maps.
Can I see if I get a topo map?
Here's the originals from 1930-ish. These are overlaid with Mass GIS topo. All our information to show the properties and house locations as they are nowadays. I apologize, I did not print out enough of the newer topo maps that show the actual saddle being formed. If you look at this quad sheet printout, you can see the dark blue line that runs through the roadway, but it never approaches the property, which is kind of located right where about 165.5 is written on the plan, in the middle of the page. So you can see from there, there's nothing shown. And that would be our first, if we were to go out to the site now, prior to any kind of design, regardless if it was new construction or redevelopment, this would be our first step as soon as we saw that there was some kind of a channelized flow on the property. And we would right off the bat not even be considering riverfront area because there's nothing marked within the spot maps. And I can point this out to each of the individual commission members, the potential, or the saddle that the newer quad maps show, but I only have one page and it's kind of small to see. I apologize.
Brad, thoughts?
Does anyone have a copy of the flood map for the site?
Was the FEMA not included?
In the noticing time?
I think it was included in there.
I did look at it. I know where you're going with it. There is documentation that there is some kind of a flow through there. Hence why the floodplain or the flood area develops. But again, if you look at what we're required to do via the topo maps, we're not even being considered as a riverfront area. Even stream stats still shows the stream as shown on USGS, and as, granted, it's a approximate location so that you can do the analysis. They do show a light blue line within stream stats, just so you can have a point to pick on when you look at these things online, as you can see on the printouts. But still, at the end of the day, you have to look at what's at the topo maps. That's what's written in the regulations. That's what we have to follow.
I'm sorry, do we have a copy of the flood map?
I do not, because it was an online submission, so it was done online.
Do you have a copy of that?
I don't have a copy of it.
Okay.
But I do know your train of thought on that.
I guess my question is, as I'm definitely not as technically familiar with the rules as you and Mr. Stone and Angela are probably, whether it's perennial, intermittent, how is that going to affect this project at the end of the day?
Unfortunately, at the end of the day, the project is considered a redevelopment project. So we are grandfathered, and we do have the ability to get certain leeways, for lack of a better term, leeways on everything. But it also impacts future, if anything else they wanted to do in the future, that designation. Because as soon as we call it a perennial, you affect not only this property, but other properties
Everything around it, right?
But as this being on the headwaters of it, that means you're essentially telling everybody downstream that it's also a perennial, even though by the regulations it's not.
So even if this stream was to flow year-round, it still wouldn't be perennial?
Even if it flows year-round, it's unfortunately 1B, I think it is.
They're in the process of reading their USGS
Yeah.
maps, and even when I spoke to the state, they said that they aren't accurate on cases, and kind of the way it was worded to me was that this one might get by. The last conversation I had with Judy, even though it, by definition scientifically, that's how she feels, but by the regulations, going through the historical files and looking at DPW believes it's obviously perennial, but that's going by plans that they have from working over there. I think that pipe under Anthony was put in 1964. That's when we have the proposed plans for that. And then all I have is like an enforcement order from 1985 for Fort Anthony for when he repiped the stream underneath his property.
Yeah, that's where it was determined to be perennial.
It was before the Riverfront Protection Act, so they just referred to it as an existing brook. But he had put an 18.5-inch pipe in, and the commission had required him to do a 30-inch, and the only plan I have is like proposed, it says it was a 42-inch. So it's back in the 80s, so it was still like blueprint, so it's kind of hard to say what's in there without going onto his property, or probably not his property anymore, but.
So when you calculate the, just to help me understand this, when you calculate the area, you're looking at the high points basically around the area that everything kind of flows into?
I don't develop this.
Right, but
the program does.
But why does it end at the property? Why does it stop basically where the property is? It wouldn't take into account.
I can't give you that answer. I know that as you look up gradient, there's actually a little bit of a knoll. If you look on.
I mean, it just seems strange that the area in yellow stops on the property line and it doesn't continue along the stream any further. That's what I'm trying, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I got you.
And just to confirm, Chris, with stream stats, you didn't draw out that line. That was a predefined line.
Correct. So, if you will, I'll walk through the commission, my review in a moment here. So here's the most current USGS map, although it's not accepted by the department. Let me see. So here's the stream we're looking at. Here's a bridge. bed, and here's the stream bed. So these are the same contours, and there's a high point right here. So this is what's called creating the saddle. So water would drop, will either go left or right based on where it ends up. And when you look at it, it ends up right about there, in between Eva Drive and everything. So when you look at Eva Drive, granted these are old, this is based on the old stuff, it lines up pretty close to everything. So that's what it's looking at. It's looking at what the topographic information showed way back when, and saying that this is a high point, so water's going this way or that way.
Yeah.
The shift in it, based on what you see, is based on old information and how the newer computer programs interpolate.
So this area here isn't considered watershed for that stream? Or is that you only looking upstream, you don't look downstream?
You only look upstream, because at this point, this is what it's collecting. So here's... So it only looks at what it's accumulating upstream at that point, upgrading of it. Kind of like if you catch basin, you're only going to review a catch basin upstream for the upper portion, rather than looking at the down portion.
So realistically, the numbers could be like, it could be intermittent here, but be perennial when it reaches this
Exactly.
point because of the volume of the watershed.
Correct. So if we were looking at a larger watershed, like, for lack of a better term, and I guarantee you I'm not going to be using any correct terminology, if you were to look at the Nashua, or even the Sauhegan, where it forms up in Ashby and Ashburnham, right where it really starts may not even be a perennial stream. It's probably intermittent because it hasn't developed enough volume going to it. But as you go down gradient of it, eventually it does turn into a full-blown perennial stream and is subject to the act. That's how you got to think of it. But the Merrimack headwater is watershed's a lot smaller than the Merrimack outlet into the Atlantic. That's glorified size. That's how you have to think of it. Just to show the other commissioners. So we have a saddle that forms right here. Now here's the stream that's considered perennial. There's a saddle that forms this way, right here, that ends up right around Eva Drive, which is right here. So the discrepancy in how it reviews, granted it's an old map versus a new map, the new program is looking at an old plan and trying to interpolate. So that's why it's stopping right where it's being shown, because it's shown, the program is looking at the topographic information as being a high point here. So the water drop that comes from here goes right into this area.
Yet all of this is perennial.
Yet, even though all this is perennial, and there's a perennial stream that comes flowing through here, the Fall Brook,
Right.
but at this point in time, it hasn't accumulated the watershed requirements, both in the field and per a statistical review.
Now, wasn't there a discussion last meeting about this stream being relocated?
Correct, and that's why we're looking at that point with the two stream stats reports. So for the sake of argument, even though we can't say for certain whether or not it was diverted and or not diverted, we took a look at that high point within the stream stats and tell me how much of the watershed area this thing has. When we ran that report, it came out at 0.3 square miles. So even if we were to use the cumulative, you're still looking at only 0.35, 0.36 square miles. And frankly, if we were to do a new project out on that perennial stream, we would be taking a hard look at whether or not we wanted to go through the rigmarole of documenting the stream bed being dry during the course of the year. That would be a strong consideration at that point we'd be making. But by showing the two stream stats, combining into one, granted it's not how the regulations call it, but we're doing it as a more of a cover ourselves kind of a maneuver, it's still not accumulating the volume that's required.
Yet this artist's conception, for lack of a better term, shows quite a flow here. Is that unintentional or intentional? I mean, it says right on it, raw flow.
Yeah, so there is a channelized flow there. If it's
Year
not,
round.
can't say it. We can't say that it's year round because I don't have the information to tell you that. But it's showing a channelized flow in that area. Maybe that's just an artist's interpretation because you see a channelized flow. Right. It's got to show a pretty picture.
And intermittent streams do have a direction.
Yep.
Downhill. Generally.
If it flows uphill, we have bigger issues.
Chris, could you just tell me offhand which lot number on this map is the site that is not marked? You said somewhere around 165.
So here's number 4 that Angela was talking about, so we're right here.
Right there, okay.
Thoughts, questions, concerns, comments? Yes, sir.
So I've looked at this. I've also looked at the flood map. I was hoping if there was a copy here that everybody else could see as well. Going back to the definition of a river, for all intent and purpose, it starts with the USGS flood map. So do you have that thick blue line on there? If you have that line, it's presumed perennial until you overcome that presumption. That's irregardless of watershed size. When you look at watershed size, that's for things to pull, for instance, an intermittent stream into perennial status based on its watershed flow and other things. The areas that we've discussed looking at this is essentially you have a mapped perennial stream with this segment of a stream that's unmapped, with another mapped perennial stream downstream of that. Now, looking at recent aerials as well as the recent topo maps that are available on numerous websites, you can see that that stream has been diverted. It's changed its route. It's now connected, doesn't go in the direction it used to. So you essentially have a mapped perennial stream that flows through something that's unmapped that flows into another mapped perennial area. It's quite possible to have a perennial stream. You know, it's not common, but there are things like losing streams where you have perennial flow upstream. All of a sudden, because of gravelly conditions or something else, you might have an intermittent segment, and then the flow picks up again further downstream when you have a larger watershed size. That was one of the things I looked at here to consider, well, what's happening? Are we losing water at some point? The flood map shows that you have a zone B, essentially from, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to have to go with what I recall, essentially from Anthony Road and to the south, and as you cross to the west of Pleasant Street. It's mapped as a zone B, I believe, which is a 500-year. And then from this project site on down, it's mapped as a zone A, which means you've gone from a 500 to a 100-year. Current new map revisions, which haven't been done here yet, they refer that to the 1% storm you might have heard. So the flood map's telling me that you're only increasing the flow at that point. You're not losing flow. It's not really losing stream there. There's plenty of areas within the regulations where you run into, and streams is a big one. I've been through a number of them at local and adjudicatory appeals. You get these gray areas within the definitions, and you have to look at the intent. And sometimes simply if something looks like a duck, acts like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. You have a perennial stream that's mapped. You have something that's not in between, but we know from the field and other evidence that it's continuous flow into another mapped perennial area. The way I look at it is it's a perennial stream at this point. The way, and I think we suggested this at the last meeting, you can overcome the presumption by showing that the stream is dry. This is a great time of year to do that. Or, again, as Chris had mentioned, it's a redevelopment project. You can quite possibly, maybe without doing anything to the design, show that you meet the performance standards for work within the riverfront with this project. That's one option. I haven't seen anything that's swayed me to believe that this is not perennial at this point.
And with all due respect, the regulations don't call for the flood map. I completely agree with you that it is showing that there is a Zone B upgrading of it, and then right before it starts going underneath Anthony Road or whatever it may be called, it does switch over to the A zone. But that's not what the regulations call for. The regulations call for the U.S. topo plot maps. We have provided that documentation. At the end of the day, that's how we have to look at it. Because unfortunately, I don't want to say it, but that's kind of like changing the rules midway through the game. Because this is what we have to go by everywhere in the state. If it's marked as a dark blue line, that's a perennial stream unless we go out, prove that for 4 days it's not flowing, then it's an intermittent. We can get away from the Riverfront Act. But the regulations specifically state that if it's not shown on the topo map, it's not a stream. That's how we have to look at it. And that's a fairly substantial statement to make because that's exactly what's in the regulations. And I completely agree with everything you're saying about the flood zone, and it's eventually developing some sort of a flow and everything like that. But at the end of the day, we have to look at what the topo maps say.
I talked to Judy Schmidt, who was also the Mass DEP reviewer, and when I brought up that, people think it could be perennial, she noted there are a lot of gray areas, as you mentioned, but however, if they were to write the regulations to tackle every single type of condition, she said it would be 500 pages. And so she deferred me back to the definition for perennial stream.
Going back to Mr. Stone's point, so if an area isn't on a, if this area isn't shown as being a perennial stream back in 1900 because it was diverted in the 1960s, then it's irrelevant. Whatever the regulations say, if you reroute a perennial stream, it's still a perennial stream, even if the blue line goes.
But even in the newer
direction.
quad maps, it still doesn't show it as such. That's the way to look at it as well. But even if it were to be considered a light blue line at that point in time, we would still be well below the.
But I mean, clearly in this case, though, that you have, water flowing in a channel that's not on this map. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Just because you don't see a blue line there doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You can't just, wish it away. You have flowing water running through a property.
Yeah. But that's also being developed via its contributing watershed at that point in time. There's a stream upgrading of it that's perennial. And it's, regardless of what you do, like a channelized flow, it has a contributing watershed to it, so it's ultimately going to create a flow, regardless of what's going on.
But you've also got areas that could be flowing into this that are, if it's underground, I mean, if it's being piped from all different locations, that watershed could be bigger than just this one section.
Fair.
So we could be looking at just a small portion of the watershed.
And now you're getting into a whole geophysical component of everything that's well beyond the components of the Wetlands Protection Act.
And I have a copy of the definitions of perennial. It's going through C right here for your reference.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. Wouldn't 4 simple photographs solve this dilemma? Does somebody have those?
No.
Nobody has a photograph of this thing being dry for 4 consecutive.
Because it's not mapped. Per the regulations, we don't have to do that.
How about the landowner?
I don't think we take pictures of the river for fun.
You don't take pictures in your yard?
That's a big yard. We're mainly in the back where the pool is.
It's covered by a lot of vegetation and below the water level.
You're the landowner?
Yes, I have.
Have you seen it dry before?
From time to time.
From time to time.
When I was a kid playing in it, it would be dry.
We first got there, it was
Once in a while.
dry.
Yeah. That would be the easy out. 4 photographs.
Brad, can you point me where in the regulations the intent comes into play?
Right at the beginning that I mentioned last
preamble.
Yeah. So again, I've been through a number of different stream scenarios. I've walked through the appeals. I've been through unique scenarios. I gave the example of I've been through perennial stream relocation projects myself. And I find it hard to believe that if you have a perennial stream on USGS map today, all of a sudden that's been relocated over here, somebody could come back the next day and say, well, look, this isn't on the USGS. It's no longer, this isn't a perennial stream here. And that's happened. There has been redevelopment projects where perennial streams have been relocated. So, I mean, the evidence is clear showing that if you have, everything's connected here. I don't see otherwise that it's not connected. And if we were to walk upstream, the regulations are 100% clear to me that you have to overcome that perennial presumption. Now, moving further downstream, where all the evidence to me points you're only getting more water, you're not getting less, you're not under a losing stream scenario. But all of a sudden, because, well, it's not on this map, nobody ever picked up the relocation, it's not perennial here. So from strictly a scientific approach to it, it doesn't make any sense to me.
How far downstream did you notice it was picking up?
What's that?
How far downstream you noticed the flow was picking up?
No, I noticed the flow
tributaries
is,
that go into there, and there's also the road drainage goes into that.
right, there's a lot that goes into
Down
there,
below.
but what I'm saying is, that, clear indicator that the flow is picking up is the flood maps. Flood maps have to be done using an H&H analysis. So either FEMA will contract that out to somebody, or sometimes USGS will do those. But that H&H shows that there was significantly more water there to warrant the change from the Zone B to the Zone A.
Speaking for me as a professional, I have to go by regulations when I stamp a plan. So I can ethically and confidently say, per the regulations and the definitions, that this isn't a commitment stream.
I'm a much more practical person. I'm an engineer myself. I don't like looking at maps that are from the 1900s and saying that's what's today. And if a stream is flowing, a stream is flowing. It's as simple as that. I understand regulations. I live and die by them every day. One of our commission members walked that and saw the diversion, saw the perennial parts and this, that, and the other thing. And at the end of the day, there's a brook or stream that flows today, and I get it, but the city of Leominster has changed quite a bit in 100 years. So we're relying on maps from 100 years ago to say this is the topo of that area. Basically what, and I get that regulation, there's nothing we can do about that, but at the end of the day, we're here to protect the wetlands and the watersheds of the city of Leominster, and I would have to agree with just Stone that I just practically find it hard that you have two parts of a perennial stream and in the middle it just disappears. That's how I look at it. Never mind regulations, what definitions are. There's a stream, and I know Mr. Giannakis was on the commission. I know twice before we've asked the property owner to come up with 4 pictures on 4 different days to prove it. Because we can sit here, I think, and argue all night long regulations versus what's practical and what's there. That's just my thought. Every time that someone from here, Angela, have you visited the site?
Yes.
You've been there, and I know Mr. Stone, I don't know if you were actually on the site, but I know you said you walked the area and looked at the brooks. And
I've been on the site once.
Oh, have you? Okay. A stream is a stream, and
Well, there's intermittent perennial.
well, no, I understand that, but if there's water flowing year-round, I have a hard, just practically, it's hard for me to say that's an intermittent stream based on the definition, based off the topo of whenever this was made. So, that's just my thoughts. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this and I see I'm just looking at the watershed of one particular area. If there's another source of water feeding into this, now the watershed is going to expand. And it seems like we're just looking at one single source. I mean, we just, heard that, multiple things flow into this, different parts of the city are, there's water flowing from city streets, there's different, this whole area is redirected. I'm not really sure where it, what the big picture is, what the actual, where it came from, and like what the true path is. I guess the only way would be to put something in, some kind of dye in there or whatever, and like however they test it, But I mean, it seems to me that this isn't the only watershed that we're looking at for this particular brook.
I guess that's why I asked the question is whether this is perennial, whether this is intermittent, does it change this project? And I understand what you're saying, yes, it changes the whole neighborhood, it changes the upstream and downstream properties. I understand that. But once we call it intermittent, it's intermittent as well. So then that leaves neighboring properties open to that interpretation. And
To clarify, intermittent just upstream though, downstream, it might be a different condition, as Chris suggested.
so at this point, I don't know where to go with this one.
Is there anything in this plan now that wouldn't meet
No,
the conditions if there was a perennial stream?
it's fully compliant with the Riverfront Act.
Because you didn't, I mean, we're not being asked to make a decision on whether the stream is perennial or intermittent, are we?
You make a decision on the resource areas.
As soon as you approve the notice of intent, and it should be order, you're cementing the delineation for 3 years. Similar to an ANRAD.
So if the project meets the performance standards for riverfront as a perennial stream, what is the harm in calling it perennial?
Protect Aaron's stamp, protect Lanigan's stamp, protect my stamp, because the regulations indicate that it is intermittent. In big picture, we're decommissioning the septic systems, which are going to reduce nitrate pollution. We're infiltrating groundwater by using dry wells to the rooftop. Protecting wildlife habitat, we're not disturbing any of the vegetation. We're still allowing wildlife to cross. So we're protecting the floodplain. There's no grading inside the floodplain.
So, reviewing the notice of intent submittal, the lot's approximately 37,000 square feet. 10% of that, 3,700. You're essentially turning a lot of grass to grass at the end of the day with a net increase in impervious of 2,000 square feet, give or take. So you're still well below the 10% gradient.
Right.
But I'm still hesitant to call it a perennial because I understand I'm an engineer too. I look at a lot of things and I question reality a lot, especially when you start getting into these environmental situations. But at the end of the day, we have to follow what's written. So if that math is sufficient for the commission, then we can, I don't want to say kick the ball down the road, but it's not, it's still compliant even though we're not calling it a perennial. We can call it the intermittent stream standards, if you will. But at the end of the day, there's no new vegetation being cut down, so we're not decreasing the amount of existing woodland, if there is any on the site, that's substantial enough to be considered a undisturbed area, but the entire lot is primarily landscape lawn. So at the end of the day, you're doing a little bit of grading here and there, but you're turning grass to grass, so you're not changing the nature of the topography around it, or the land use around it, except for the additional 2,049 square feet of impervious.
And that's the roof, which is all being infiltrated.
Yeah, with the roof and some
In fact, becomes a net decrease of, I think, 150 square feet.
if that makes the commission a little more, makes the project a little more palatable to the commission. If down the road somebody has to come in for another notice of intent on another property, they have to go through the same process we are going through right now. They have to provide the burden of proof that yes, it is perennial, yes, it's not, or it's an intermittent. But we have to go by what the regulations say. That's what's written, that's what's been accepted by the state. And we can do the quick math. I think Mr. Giovannucci did a very well thought out notice of intent narrative showing the whole lot area, how much is in the riverfront area or within the property as disturbed, undisturbed, everything like that. And I can do the math in about 5 seconds with a calculator.
I was like,
I'm good, but I'm not that good. I think that would be the most palatable way to make it work, both from our engineering standpoint and the commission's responsibility to the Commonwealth relative to the watershed or the water.
So the original comment from the DEP was that you needed to prove it wasn't the definition of a perennial stream contained in 310 CMR 10.5A 2A 1 B or C. And you're coming before us tonight saying both you and her because you're putting your PE stamp on this that it meets that regulation.
Correct, because if you look at the regulations, it refers to
It's A, and that's through C.
the topographic maps. And as provided, the topographic maps don't show it.
Yes.
I just have one other question. I also had a question at the last meeting regarding the, whether or not an on-site survey was done for the topo, and if you could confirm the elevation datum that was used.
Correct, it was a topographic error. That was a detail from another project. It is per, I think, NPA, whatever, 22. It's based on the floodplain maps. And there is a benchmark located just down side of the site. Be tied into that, so the elevations are copacetic.
So the elevation datum on this plan is what?
It's like wherever the
And then right there. In the note.
is this the latest revision? Sir. Based on the flood map. Yeah, 29 down. And there's a benchmark right down on Anthony that we tied it to. That's called out on the firm. But there was an on-ground topographic survey done by our crews. So the site information you're seeing is the actual site information.
So on the stream stats, where did this blue line come from? Did you draw that in?
Nope, that's what the program comes up with.
Well, where did it get that blue line from if it's not in the topographic maps? It doesn't.
Something you actually, this is a post rendering of everything, but when you zoom into this area, it actually shows the dark blue line down here shown as perennial per the topo maps, and it shows this stream being as the perennial too. I believe. Right, I don't know what was said.
Yeah, just, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to help better answer Larry's question. So stream stats shows that stream, it does not recognize that stream. So you can't click on a point on that and have it run its program. I mean, stream stats is kind of like, a young student using a calculator, garbage in, garbage out. You really have to understand how to use the program. And one of the things, if I was gonna look at this, if I felt the need to really determine the entire watershed, you really have to look at all the drainage catchments and everything else. You can't use the program for this site to click on anything to get a good watershed size. But what I printed out, it actually shows, if you look at the pixelated stream on this, that's what stream stats would recognize if you tried to get information clicking on the stream at any of those points. What it's not going to recognize is the image that it shows, the actual stream that's there today between those areas. If you want to pass that down and take a look. So stream stats will, that pixelated part, it'll recognize things on that. It will not recognize anything in
But
red.
it's pulling the information from the topographic information.
Now, we spent, at this point, we, I guess my question is, where do we go from here? We meet all the standards for whether it's perennial or for the site. kind of went over all the stuff that's changing on the site itself. I don't think, I can't remember, to be honest with you, if anybody had any problems with that. The house and all that. It didn't seem like we had any issues with that.
I had one concern that was actually brought to me after the meeting by one of my coworkers in the health department who was trying to reach you. He was concerned about the suspended sewer line and the heating system and what happens if the power goes out or if there's a break, or if you guys had a plan in place to remediate that and the effects on, obviously, the resource area.
My father's an electrician, so I'll allow him to speak to that.
Yeah, the heat trace, I've got a spec on the cable, on the pipe itself.
And we have a detail too.
I know I saw the electrical that was already out there. I just wasn't sure if it was like surge protected, if there's a generator hooked up.
That's a good
Well,
question.
yes, I do have.
You know
a
how ice
backup.
storms are.
I do have a backup generator. It's we're going to do 5 watts per square foot. This is the spec on the cable. It's a freeform cable.
I have this.
Sure.
Yeah.
I may have a couple copies here.
I was just concerned because we do know that sewer lines will freeze and burst if they're not.
Right. So what I put on a temperature controller. It activates the heating cable when it gets below 38 degrees. It's formed, and the pipe comes from the manufacturer already formed. Has the outer covering, is approved for direct burial, and the embedded heat trace cable is in there. I believe it's 5 watts per square foot. It runs along the bottom. We use them a lot in sewer treatment plants.
Yeah.
They work pretty good.
We did something like this in another project, and they were double walled, I believe. Is this a double walled pipe? Like they had a thing, so if the pipe failed, there was another.
There is a double wall on it. I'm not sure.
But I mean, if it's just covered by PVC, it looks like just it's a protective coating.
There's the foam, there's 2 inches of foam surrounding it, and then there's another outer covering on top of it.
Yeah, I think they had some sort of like protection, so if the pipe burst.
Casing, which I was putting it around, and there's a pipe and the foams, I'll put the foams on the side, and there's a PVC casing.
I thought they used a double, like some kind of double walled pipe though,
They do in some cases,
just because if you get a failure at all.
it's called, I forget, when it's really called see something, you can, it's very easy to do from the inside and prevent failures and protect from failures. It's very expensive.
But you're talking like an 8-foot section.
Yeah.
You know, you
But
don't
I
have to
don't
run.
think,
You don't have to run it.
We're probably going to do 40-foot sections because there's an expansion joint you have to have, which has to be exposed. And it's a copy, and it's a built-in expansion system because you have contraction, expansion and contraction, different temperatures. So there's going to be 20 feet on each side. These come in 20-foot lines. 20 feet is not quite going to make the distance and get the full burial that I'm looking for. I want to make sure it's down 4 feet. So I'm going to put the heat trace back in with insulation back in, so I know it's covered 100%.
Just when she said that, they can burst, it made me think that if there's nothing, if you don't have some sort, if it's just a standard pipe and there's nothing to catch it if it bursts, if there's not that gap, it's just going to go right into the brook.
that's what ideally with these types of pipes, when you have the heat trace and it'll alert the heat or it'll stimulate the heat, it will not burst. And since he has a generator, that should, in all scenarios, unless you have obviously natural disaster, which at that point,
Right.
everyone's in trouble. That this would be, that was just my main concern after discussing the health department, as well as, why not go down the driveway with everyone in the neighborhood? Because it looks like there's multiple houses up there that need.
Well, that's what I'm like, why, I'm just trying to think, why is, what is the like, why are we going across a stream rather than just, if there's already an established sewer system in the driveway?
Well, there isn't, so they would have to go, they have a shared driveway, I
Yeah.
believe it's 3 houses on one shared
Yeah.
driveway, so basically I believe it's the house in the middle that owns the whole driveway, and the other 2 houses have the right of way to use it. Basically, the owner would have to give permission and have to agree to it, they would all have to pitch in,
Oh, okay.
which, I don't know if anyone here lives on a shared driveway.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah.
Yeah, you still have to cross the brook anyways. And shared drives are very difficult because what tends to happen, maybe not in this case, is that one person takes care of it and no one else wants to,
Yeah.
contribute.
And then everybody will jump
not my
in
driveway,
here
not my
later, yeah.
problem kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And
No.
his problem is, then you need a backup generator for that
Yeah.
pump station.
Now, is it an elevation reason that it can't go, like, I know they drive the
Yeah.
pipes sometimes underground?
It wouldn't meet the existing sewer out there.
Okay.
Actually, the U.S. Army Corps suggested trenching right through the stream, and I was like, that's a little bit ridiculous, but that was their idea, what they suggested.
And then I know you had sent me the email with the math on how much of the area, even though it's not permanent disturbance to the floodplain, unfortunately, you sent me, it's the disturbance to the floodplain area for when you're installing the pipes. I just can't seem to find the map. I know we had discussed it.
A map?
The math. The
Zero.
mathematics.
0.
So there'll be no disturbance in the floodplain.
Correct.
No dirt will be moved.
Correct. Yeah, and you can see that on the profile too. There's a couple of lines, and one of them is a flood line right here. So if you trace that down, and then you see where the existing topo starts and when the proposed starts, it's outside of it.
For a conservative approach, the floodplain's at 31 elevation. I think the height bottom is well above that, so you're not within the zone.
Yeah, and under the bridge, I think it's 530.
Any other comments or questions? Any objection to opening to the public? Anybody in the audience like to speak on this notice of intent? Second time and final time. Any other questions or comments from the commission?
I would like to see the FEMA map. It's got to exist. Is there a reason we can't have that tonight? Or
I don't know.
Are you able to pull it up, Brad, on your?
No, not with my operating system. I tried.
It wasn't a requirement of the submittal, so I don't have it on me. And I relied on the engineering, the existing conditions.
Well, the FEMA map should be part of the submittal because you do have a floodplain on site, so it should be attached to the NOI.
I didn't see it in the checklist, and the NOI had it, you do it online.
Right, I need to check my paper copies. I have some in my file room. It'll probably take me 5-10 minutes.
I think we just heard that it wasn't submitted.
it's a critical piece of information.
I understand it is an online system.
Okay. So what would the commission like to do at this point? Like me to ask for a vote? Or,
And leave that up to the applicant when you want to.
I'm requesting a vote.
okay. Any objections closing the public hearing?
We heard from the public.
I did, I asked. I declare the public hearing closed. Do I have a motion? I'm gonna find my agenda.
Oh, we want to have some discussion first?
We can have discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the project, I don't see a lot that I don't see anything that I have any concerns about other than the resource area, and I mean, we can look at this all day and say that the USGS maps need to be followed, but when when a brook has been rediverted after the map is created, you can no longer go on that, so you can't use that's, you know, I mean, that might be what they call a gray area, but it's, in my opinion, it's not a gray area. It's something that's just not covered by the regulation. You know, and you can't just say, I don't see a blue line on a map from 1900. The brook doesn't exist. I think Mr. Stone is right. I mean, if there's a perennial stream upstream, a perennial stream downstream.
I guess my question
That's sort of
to my technical advisors is, if we vote, what, I guess, you know, we're voting for an NOI, but we're also, Brad, you had mentioned, we're saying we need to declare whether it's perennial or intermittent as part of that vote.
You're memorializing the wetland delineation. So the decision needs to be.
So right now, if we call for a vote and we vote yes, we're saying it's intermittent because that's what the NOI had stated. If we vote no, then it's a whole different issue. But so once we vote, we're declaring it. It's intermittent if we vote yes.
Right, we're voting based on what's been presented to us. So
Okay.
the plan
So it's
shows it is.
basically it's like an ANRAD or okay. All right. Do I have a motion for this NOI 199-1096 to issue an order of conditions for the site?
I'm going to make a motion to deny the DEP file number 199-1096 based on the fact that the resource area delineation, based on the not on the project itself, but based on the delineation of the resource area being intermittent rather than perennial.
Okay. I have a motion for denial of this NOI. Do I have a second on that?
Mr. Chairman, I would second that. Also add that the plan does not show that it meets the performance standards for work within the riverfront area under 10.5 acres.
Okay. All in favor of the denial, including Mr. Stone's addition? Opposed? And abstained. All right, Angela, will you put together the formal denial with our comments on why? All right.
Thank you.
Our second hearing pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40 is amended. There'll be a public hearing to consider a notice of intent for Michael Galasso for Central District Realty, prepared by A+ Construction Services Corp. for the construction of two office/maintenance buildings on an existing contractor yard site. This project is within 200-foot riparian zone of a river and contains floodplain buffer zone on the property. Address is 133 Nashua Street, map 379, parcel 5, DP 199-1094. You have someone representing the applicant.
Joe Danubio from A+ Construction Services Corporation.
Mark Arnold with our consultant.
It's okay if we just go put the boards up.
Yep.
Is there anyone here last week who, or was not here last week that it wasn't familiar with the project? Or do you want me to give a quick
That would be Sam,
synopsis?
and he did not watch the last meeting, so he can't vote on it anyways.
Okay.
Just discuss.
Would you like a synopsis, or are you all familiar enough with?
No, I think we're all familiar enough at this point.
Okay. There's a few things that I'd like to address that came up in the last meeting. One was it was recommended that the washing of vehicles only take place in the maintenance facilities, which the clients agreed that they were okay with that. We also talked about a wildlife border and the barrier at the rear of the site, making some openings, which we all agreed was a very good idea, and he was okay with doing that. We didn't update the plan. I spoke with the agent yesterday, and we decided that if there were more comments coming out of this hearing, we would just update the plans based on both hearings, resubmit.
There were two other comments from the regional office. One was he wanted a 72 drawdown calculation, which I provided to the agent yesterday as well. The other component he wanted was mounding analysis, because it was not 4 feet of separation between the bottom of the infiltration system and the groundwater. I gave an explanation to the agent. We're trying to avoid doing that mounding analysis. I'm suggesting that the test pit didn't go deep enough to find the seasonal groundwater. I didn't think the system would need to be designed as large as it was, so I didn't go deeper. So my suggestion was that during construction we would have probably John Roseberry witness again, test pit, and if in fact we determined that there was 4 feet of separation, we'd keep the system as is. If not, then we'd raise the system half a foot, and that would achieve that requirement that Rick Gary was requesting. Other than that, I think that addresses there was one other issue with
Yeah, those are the stormwater comments. So I did talk with Adam also about his question about needing alternative analysis for the riverfront, and after reminding him again of the redevelopment standards, he agreed with us that you don't need an alternative analysis under 4 if you're doing permitting under section 5, as long as you're providing a betterment to the riverfront area from existing conditions, which we believe we're definitely doing that with all the different measures that are proposed, whether it's the barrier to the slope to ensure protection there, the additional signage, the stormwater infiltration as well. So, and I believe that we had 2 commissioners come with the agent to the site and be able to see the trash that was on the slope that we're looking to remove, and the barrier that we want to put up just to really help manage the edge of that site to really prevent any other future encroachments, which he considers a really good benefit to the commission in being able to control this site and manage it in the longer term.
Who was on the site?
Myself, Amanda, and Paul.
Paul and North. What did you see? What did you find? Comments, questions?
When I was up in the southwest corner of the lot, if you just kind of circle that area, it was talked about as being a dead storage area. And to me, it looked like there was a substantial amount of topsoil in that area. It didn't look like the gravelly garbage.
It's because they hadn't been storing any stuff there recently, but just because that area wasn't being used in the past 3 months, possibly doesn't mean in the next month they could be bringing stuff back there to store, just because again they're constantly moving materials around, and parking equipment in different areas. I mean, as you saw, they were parking equipment in areas that weren't used 2 months ago, just because of the way they were shuffling their equipment around. So the aerial photography is fairly consistent, showing that the whole area has been actively shuffled every few months, just because of what's occurring.
But when I was there, I scuffed that area. You probably saw me doing it. I scuffed it down to about 3 inches with my boot, and it was all soil. It wasn't gravel.
So
Topsoil.
yeah, so it may be there may be some topsoil. Again, I mean, we mentioned the first round. There's places where you have some vegetation that's been able to establish, and you might get a little bit of development of some soil in those areas. But the whole area has been used as a laydown area historically for decades.
I guess what I'm getting at is the entire site redevelopment, or is part of this development?
So the redevelopment area is within the ECB, basically. That's the redevelopment thing, and everything else is continued use of what it's been used for historically, which is what the owner's been maintaining in the sense of using it as a laydown area. So again, constantly moving stuff around in different areas depending on what storage he's using for the time being while he's working on different projects off site.
I did my own little bit of research, and they do have available Jersey barriers with what are called scuppers. Is your client open to installing those rather than staggering?
Do you mean scuffers, the ones with the space underneath?
Photograph of them right here. 1B.
Okay, so you mean with actual, well, looks like this, Joe.
Passageways.
See that? Passageways.
I mean, we talked about it at the
Yeah,
last meeting,
I don't-
I wasn't familiar with them. but
Yeah, I'm not familiar with them either. I mean, they do look like they're fairly simple. I mean, they're probably going to be a little more expensive just because they're going to be custom orders to bring in.
But you said
But you don't-
at
but you
last
avoid
meeting
this-
you didn't have to put the barriers in.
Well, we were going to do the staggering instead. That was our proposal, was to stagger the barriers, and that provides full opening between the moving
I
versus
mean,
that.
in lieu of
But
that, if you can't afford it, in lieu of that.
I don't think
you'd be
he's
okay
worried
with
about
that.
that. I guess my comment on this is, from a wildlife standpoint, I don't know what you'd be expecting on that slope, if there were deer or coyote or,
A deer will go right over it, as a coyote would as well.
you think so?
But
All right.
Raccoons, possums, fisher cats,
So,
squirrels,
no-
chipmunks, I could go on and on.
Yeah, I think
But that's I guess they'd go over it, but yeah, I guess
That would
smaller
function.
animals, maybe turtles or what have you, go
that would
under
function like.
that, but
Just
I
go
would say
down
if you
Route
had
2
the,
and count the dead animals. I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
I would say if you had the initial idea that you proposed, that would probably be more accommodating to every type of wildlife.
Well, Joe, I
And
think.
then deer and coyote wouldn't have to hop over, or,
Well, they would anyway.
Well, I would say the
but he would be amenable to do that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think we'd definitely be willing to have that as a condition, since if these can be in place, we could definitely be willing to do those. The only thing I would say is if you have that type of setup, that opens up the opportunity for equipment to be staggered right in front of that opening and would block it. So for example, if they staged a pallet, they could stage a pallet right in front of the opening that could block the opening. The
Right.
stagger actually forces that a little more of a gap space in their storage area,
Correct.
which actually creates more openings.
Yep.
And I think that actually creates a wider passage and probably more flexible than that, even though I do think that's a really great idea. But that's the only thing I can think of is that when I see a yard with different types of things being stored there, if something's dropped there. Now granted, it may not be every opening is going to be blocked, but that's the only thing I can see. Or if there was some gravel that was stored there, it could also travel in, versus if they're staggered with 1 foot overlap, it's harder for the gravel to actually go, and the gravel would have to go around the opening to really block it or get it through. But I think if the commission wants the condition that the staggering is every five Jersey barriers we do a stagger, or it's every 5 has the openings.
That's 40 feet, 5 is 40 feet.
So I think that allows for, I think either that or this is allowable, and the commission would prefer that if the staggering isn't, if that's not available, the staggering is allowed. I think that might be the best way to do it, every 5 if that's required, and unless.
Well, I was thinking every third barrier with a minimum of 24 inches staggered. I don't care what the overlap is, but 24-inch gap every third barrier.
What do you mean between the?
You got 2 solids and then a third one out.
Okay, but you want, but I mean, so like a 2 foot out, and then it's not that much, and then
24
a 1
inch
foot,
out.
and then a 1 foot overlap.
24-inch would accommodate muskrat, possums, raccoons, fox.
Yeah, you could get 2 side
You're
by
saying
side.
24-inch overlap and then,
No, 12-inch overlap, 24-inch depth spacing.
Right, 24-inch gap is what I want through the barriers.
Yeah, like, yeah, that's a good way to put it, is cap.
Right. So you have 2 barriers side to side, and then that third barrier steps out. Then you can have 2 more.
Yep.
And the next one steps out.
Yep.
So no more than 2 consecutive barriers.
Okay. So yeah, no more. Yeah, I think that's definitely something I think that we're definitely willing to agree to.
Okay.
I'm just envisioning it.
Yeah.
I mean, either that or we could do that, which then we could just do a continuous.
Right.
Okay.
If you can find them. I didn't even know anything this.
Well, it might be a custom precast.
Yeah.
That might be what it
Sure
is. What's the height that you'd like and the width, just so we have an idea?
You know, I'm not sure. A lot of this research is incomplete, but that height to me looks like it's 18 inches.
That's what I was thinking. 18 by.
It looks like it's the whole base of the barrier itself. How tall is that base?
It's the base is 36. It's a 30. it was
Base
2
is
feet,
9
2
inches.
2 feet 8 inches plus
You
9.
take a look at that
3
photograph,
feet.
it looks like it's pretty much the height of the base, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. So it's these might be larger barriers because sometimes the Jersey barriers are like 4 feet,
Right.
versus this is like 3 feet 1 inch.
Mhm.
So I would say that
Yeah, your base was 9 inches, wasn't it?
yeah, it is. Yeah. So I would think that you would want at least a 12-inch for all the smaller mammals.
Yeah.
So we could do a 12-inch by 36-inch or a 24-inch, 12-inch by 24-inch, opening every three.
Are we still on the same page here? I thought we were talking about doing the
We were looking at-
overlap.
we were looking at what's called the
There's-
scupper, if it's
There's two options. One is-
Okay, yeah, all right. I thought.
One is the overlap. Well, here's if we do what he has, we can do a continuous barrier, we like the applicant to have possibly some flexibility here, because he's not aware of this additional spacing. But I think either way, he's fine with it, and you appear to be fine with it. And I would agree this is probably the nicer option. But I want to make sure we can just kind of scope out what we're looking for,
Yeah.
and that way we can make sure that they're built to what you're looking for. So you're looking for a 12-inch high, minimum 24-inch wide.
What's the length of the barrier itself? 4 feet?
Typically they're 8 feet long, I believe. Typically about 8 feet long.
This one's at least 36, then. That's
So yeah, so you could do 12 by
an
36.
8-foot barrier, that's gotta be at least 36, if not 48.
So you could do a 12 by 36
Yeah.
inch opening every 3 barriers, or it's staggered every 3 barriers with a 24-inch gap.
The only thing with the stagger we gotta be careful of is, like you said, it's a working site. There's nothing to stop somebody with a big piece of equipment from just closing that up to make a little more room to get some equipment. But
I would say you could do the same for that too. They could just dump a pile of dirt or gravel or
Yeah.
whatever. Granted, I mean, they're having a salt shed put in the back there to manage their materials, but you just, in the heat of the moment, something comes in, they can't get it over there. Either way you look at it, it could happen.
right.
There is signage
Both
proposed
options.
about no dumping, and just to have that clear.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of people that work the site, so a sign will kind of just let everybody
Yeah.
know. Because now that, somebody new starts, they're not gonna
Yeah.
say, hey, don't forget,
My thought on both those options, just another thought, is having the gap would probably be the better option. They'd probably be less likely to get something.
Yeah.
Even if there was something in the way with that gap, they probably could still maybe manage their way around it.
Because there will
That,
be,
that,
they will
that
overlap.
barrier there,
Yeah.
if you put something in front of it, it's so low.
Yeah.
You'll still have that gap to a height and a little width.
can they be like, do they just dropped in place, or can they be like nailed, like kind of spiked in, somehow?
Rebar of some kind.
No, like I'm saying at the end, it can
Yeah, they
is
could
there
be
like an
spiked in.
anchor that,
Yeah, they could have a couple.
if you could
They
anchor
have, well,
the
they
ends.
usually have sometimes the ends have U rebar coming out of them.
Because if you could just put like something in there, that would move.
Yeah, and then they also have where you can connect them. Well, I probably would want to do that here, but at each end of the barrier. That would create
You
space.
basically want you anchored.
They can be, they normally come with a U rebars coming out, and then they make a hook,
Pin that goes through.
a pin, and you can
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. If that's the case, you could just say that each end of an exposed barrier shall have a pin, including the ones. Yeah, I mean, this all staggered Jersey barriers shall be anchored with pins on the ends.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's going to be a lot less than buying custom fabricated,
Yeah. And
and that will allow the larger deer and.
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, I'm going to
Yeah, they
be.
definitely have those.
It's possible, even if you have a couple connected or pinned down. I mean, no matter what you
No,
do,
but at
no
least
matter
you're
what you
making
do,
an
the
effort,
likelihood it could happen. But
Oh yeah, but that way if somebody bumps it or something, it's not. It's less
Yeah.
likely to move.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're definitely amenable to that.
And if you look at the barriers over on.
Does the
Just an
owner,
example, those barriers that were on behind
The existing ones.
the adjacent site and kind of coming back towards our site, I mean, they look like they were pretty stable and they've been there for years and hadn't moved, so if that gives you any
Does the
confidence.
owner own any barriers right now?
He does
All
have.
contractors do, they have a
Yeah, he's got
Here, there, everywhere.
He does have some along the property line
There are a
here.
few in there.
Well, I'm
So-
just, my thought is to do what we're talking about, does he already own these? So are we,
That's
the
why-
first thing we're gonna come up with is, well, I own all these barriers, my plan is to do this.
That's-
I don't wanna get new barriers, no, I don't have barriers that have hooks, no, I'm not gonna do this because I already own them, that's my
I
question.
think the barriers that he does have on site, he would probably reuse. Again, they probably reuse those on various jobs, the traffic
Right.
in and in. There's the type of contractor that does small bridges, various other things where you might need those.
The only ones
Road
that
closing.
need, the only ones that need the pins are every third
Right.
barrier. So
So
there's
basically, the ones going up against that brook, he's gonna have to buy because they gotta stay there forever.
the ones that are stacked.
Well, yeah, I mean, whether he gets new ones or uses ones that he already
That's
has.
what I'm saying, but the
But
ones he
eventually,
already
they're gonna
has.
be, there for in perpetuity.
But the ones he already has, do they have all the requirements that we're looking for?
Well, we're
If
only
they
looking
don't,
for, you're only looking
that's
for
fine.
1/3. You're only looking for 1/3 of the barriers
That's
to
my
actually meet that
question.
requirement. So I think that's a reasonable requirement that I think I think he should be able to achieve.
Okay.
If they don't, I already talked with him, I think he's,
That's fine.
amenable to do what is required just to make
Because I think it's
progress happen.
gonna be, I mean, standard barrier with hooks and stuff is something you can get readily available. And
Yeah, he should
the other
be able
things,
to
so-
access them very easily. So, and again, it's only 1/3 of the barriers. It's the ones that are permanently in place don't need to be anchored if they're anchored against the back.
Any other questions or comments about anything else on the site?
I have the order, well, a draft of our typical conditions, our boilerplate that we had requested.
Okay.
Could I trace back to a previous comment? of
Yeah.
Commissioners? Regarding your comment about the graded area back here, just as a, give an example of what's occurred on the other side, we did the test pit over here.
Yeah.
Again, there was pavement pretty close by. That was all dirt. Meanwhile, while we did the test pit, and I have a picture here if you want to look at it, there was, I look at the log, but a couple inches of topsoil there. You don't see that. Just to give you an idea, kind of what Mark was saying, it's being turned and overturned, over the years. So even where you might not expect to see it because it wasn't great vegetation, there is a significant amount of topsoil. So I don't know if that helps you better, put you more at ease at the condition of the site and the degradation.
Because you're worried about disturbed and undisturbed.
So
redevelopment.
that's like, I don't know, it looks like 4 to 6 inches. I have to read the test log of the angles
Yeah,
to
we
get
didn't
what actually
we
it
didn't
is.
do any core, I just scuffed it with my boot.
But there's, I think you're gonna, again, you'll have vegetation in various parts of the site over time, depending on what was there. And there will be footprint of topsoil there because of that.
And did you do any follow-up on the drains that were, is that gray building, that one-story existing building, is that part of this proposal as well?
Nope, that's just,
That's a different parcel?
that's a separate property. It is owned by the same
Because
client, but-
we were questioning where the drains from that roof actually go.
I think from what I understand, when I was on site doing the test pit, the perk test, they had one of their operators from that site take the whole forest.
Yeah.
And he was talking about some of the other things. I was telling him we're probably going to do an infiltration system for this site here, and he said they had a similar one over there somewhere. My company also did the existing condition survey, but there were no record plans of that for us to show where it was. So.
Yeah.
But I think they do have a similar type of system. It might be, I think we're suggesting HDPE perforated pipe and stone. They might have had Caltex or something, one of those other
So
fancy.
you're thinking there's a second infiltration system?
There is
on
one
that building?
somewhere, it's probably behind here or something. So when they permitted that building, they did similar.
Angela, would you have any record of that?
Depends on when it was done and if they had filed anything. I can go through the files next week if you'd like and follow up as a project update for the next meeting. But that's not part of.
Yeah, I think
Can I ask what that has to do with our
we're
site?
set back.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a different site, so it's
Yeah.
on there because he owns it and it's the
No,
same
just caught
area,
my
but
attention when I was
Yeah.
on the site a couple
Yeah.
days ago.
I don't think it's related to the site and this permit.
it's not gonna connect. But I can answer that question under project updates
There's
for the
no
next
rush.
meeting.
I have one question about this. You asked for wetland boundary markers. Are those just the simple aluminum tags?
Yes, we have them in the office and I
Okay,
can provide them.
just
to you.
that's totally fine. That's very easy. Even though I don't know if anybody's gonna get near this wetland edge, but that's totally fine. Everything else there looks very reasonable. Yep.
They're
What are
the typical general.
It's typical. They're typical general conditions. There's nothing special.
You put the markers at the bottom of the slope?
You
Yes.
put them like on the tree, like
The trees, yeah.
The
You
trees.
put them on the trees. That's
At the bottom?
yes. So we can put them at the top if,
That would
if,
probably make
if you want to change that and say put the markers at the top of the tree and say there's wetlands.
that makes
That makes more sense.
Makes more sense.
I don't think a lot of people are gonna be, I think our people, when they did the survey, and probably when you guys flagged it, had a difficult time getting down that thing, so it might not be a bad one.
Did you have any other questions about the project's design? Or
Anything else, guys? Please. Anybody in the audience like to speak on this notice of intent? Second time and final time? All right, any objection to closing the public hearing? All right, declare the public hearing closed. Do I have a motion for a notice of intent in the order of conditions for DEP 199-1094 with the added condition of every third barrier to be staggered, overlapped by a foot with a 24-inch space with pinned ends to the ground, wetland signs attached to the top of the slope. What else? Was there any? I don't think there was any others.
or his barrier option, I think. You might
Well,
They're going with the
yeah.
staggered.
I think
Okay,
we
try the
should
second, or we'll just leave it as is.
decide what it is.
Yeah.
Fine with the staggered.
So, I think that was it. So, do I have a motion for that?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second? All in favor or any comments? All in favor?
I was gonna say, with the sign addition, the sign change, that moved the signs to the top of the
Yeah.
slope.
I did.
You did, yeah.
I did.
That was writing. That was writing the measurements down.
So all in favor again?
Yeah.
Opposed and abstained? Thank you. All set.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Is it okay if we keep this copy?
Yeah, that's like, yeah.
Thank you very much, you guys have a great night.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes.
I need to excuse myself from the next meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Tone.
Mr. Stone.
The next hearing has been requested to be continued. That is DEP 199-1095, which is for 449 Wachusett Street, the solar project. That is continued to the September 24th, 2019 meeting. I'll open the next two hearings together. It is for a notice of intent by Jim Exaris for development of a single-family residential lot, 100-foot buffer zone, address Lot 3, Mary Ave Extension, map 419, Lot 23, DEP 199-1086. And the other property is address 1157R, map 419, map Lot 23, DEP 199-1085. Someone representing the applicant.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Matt Morrow, reporting in for the applicant. Just wanted to update the commission. I am, of course, going to ask for a continuance. The plans aren't finished yet for both Orchard Hills and Mary Ave, so I wanted to update the commission on what the status was. The flagging with Art Allen was done. That was completed. It's been survey located. There were a couple of flags that they missed. I went out, I found them, had them relocate them. The plans are being updated. Those should be ready for next week. For the next meeting, we should be able to examine those plans. I'll get them to Art to confirm the boundaries that we both agreed on, and we can close that one up. On Mary Ave, Tom Perigallo is going to be up this Thursday. He had some other projects he was working on, and then he tragically had lost his dad, so he's just coming back from that. And we're going to be out this week to evaluate those borders on that wetland as you're looking back up towards Main Street on the right-hand side, closer to Penny Lane. So we're going to evaluate that, finish that, and finalize that as well for the commission's perusal on the plans. So make sure that you have those in advance of the next meeting. I'd also like on Mary Ave, I noticed that you guys have Penny Lane on your agenda for enforcement.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that. We have two people here whose bedtime might be coming up soon, so I was going to ask if we could move out the Penny Lane with the Mary Ave, since it's kind of all intertwined.
If they wanted to come up, I can work to address that. My client, not Mr. Coyview, my client, Mr. Exaris, has asked me to take a look at their plans, take a look at the previous wetland, and see if we can come up with an area also that maybe we can do some mitigation work on, like wetland replication, for example.
So like if you guys were had to redo the plans, you guys would add that in, basically.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, considering how close those are linked, and I think actually Ron Toyview is going to build one of those houses if it goes through on Mary Ave, whether they do one house or three houses. Mr. Exaris is like, well, you've got an issue here, let's resolve the issue at the same time. He's obviously got plenty of room that's going to be left regardless of what he does in that property for replication. So let's come up with a plan to see what we can do to maybe mitigate what had happened over there. I mean, I'm still not exactly sure how that all took place, but we're stuck with an area that was filled. It needs to be mitigated one way or the other. We don't want to do it in a way that's going to wind up costing the homeowner his yard.
Correct.
There are areas that are adjacent to that could be really good for replication, and I think that's something that, probably could all work on together. And Mr. Exaris has authorized myself to, and I'll have Tom also look at it with me, and we're out there on Thursday and see what we can find.
Another thing while you guys are looking at it would be to make sure that the house that was built would meet the performance standards, that we meet, just because I do know that the home that's there does have some substantial flooding issues. It's obviously very wet. Not so like the replication area, well, that's one part of it. I think it's also that someone's living in a house that gets soaking wet every time it rains, basically, which if we'd gone through probably the proper channel, that probably could have been avoided.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on that. I'd be more than happy to examine that with my client.
Okay.
Let me make it clear that Mr. Coyview is not my client. Mr. Exaris is my client. He's just asking me to do this to try to resolve all the issues in the area.
Okay.
That's it in a nutshell as far as that goes.
So does the commission have any issue with talking about Penny Lane enforcement as part of all this, which we already are? I just want to double check. Okay.
No, that's fine.
So right now, where do we sit with Penny Lane?
Once again, Mr. Coyview and Mr. Jamie Rowe was supposed to be at this meeting to represent their half. I believe I forwarded you an email and I kind of described the situation. They say they're going to be here, and then unfortunately they're not here. I'm not sure if it's a communication error on their part or if they're forgetting or if they need more time to work on it. Last time I had spoken to Mr. Coyview, they were working on plans. They were still reviewing the file.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that was
Well, I'm
in
going to have to
conjunction.
review it with them. It's
with
probably because they figured that I'm here, explaining the
That
fact
could
that
be
we're going
as
to come up with a
well.
mitigation area, and
they're not working
that
on it.
whole concept that you just talked about and what happened, the performance standards, all the other, potential mitigation resolutions on 9 Penny Lane, that's all going to have to be a part of it. It's not just, you can't piecemeal it. It's all got to go together.
Right.
You can't. There's just no way possible. That would create a disconnect that would be bad for everybody.
Okay. So what does 9 Penny Lane need to do other than just speak with Mr. Morrow and Mr. Exaris and kind of work through that plan together?
Hello, John, is the homeowner at 9 Penny Lane.
Yes.
Basically, would be to work with Mr. Morrow if you want to give him permission, if you'd like to have, to either obviously work with Mr. Morrow on allowing him on the property to evaluate it, kind of see the historical fill, what needs to be done to remediate, to meet the performance standards for the building that's currently there, as well as the replication area, and just to kind of work with you on what the next steps are. I think that would be agreeable.
That's- yeah,
And I'm sure
I
Mr.
mean-
Xeris would obviously.
I feel bad for you keep coming to meetings, and the can keeps getting kicked down the road, and I understand it's very frustrating. I think with Mary Ave being adjacent to it, I think it's a good plan. I just want to not have you come to every single meeting, to not have the builder show up and.
Yeah, I mean, I like coming here, but yeah, I'd rather, I'd rather not.
So it sounds like we have a plan. Is this something we could hopefully have an update on by the 24th meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So the only thing you need from the homeowner is just permission to enter your property to do a wetlands analysis at this point, because you're dealing with the builder of his home and not.
Well, he's dealing with the developer
The
for Mary
developer,
Ave, so
yeah.
I just want to clarify.
So.
Right, so how does the builder tie into this, right? Because obviously, he's representing the owner of Mary Ave, which, I mean, obviously, he's going to evaluate both properties, but how does that tie the builder back into this whole thing?
They have some type of their own relationship going when it comes to building in that area. So,
How does that relate to me, though?
well,
Like, how does that fix my problem to have him involved in
the
that?
whole thing is that Mr. Xeris wants to build houses in back of where you are right now. There is a wet area, obviously, in the back of your lot, and it looks like it expanded as a result of what happened with your particular property. So in order for Mr. Xeris to build his home, straighten out your situation, the two wetlands tie together. So because of the way the land is going and with what happened to you, everything is tied together. So in order for him to be able to make sure that he can build properly, he needs to resolve your issue. Because the plain fact is, he doesn't want to resolve his issue, and then you wind up resolving your issue separately, and it winds up affecting him again, and everybody's back at square one. So you need to tie everything together.
And I get that. Okay.
So basically, there's an enforcement order with, what's the builder's, the developer's name?
His name is Mr. Ron Coyview and Jim
Okay.
Adams. They own Harbor Classic Homes.
Okay, so they have, as does the homeowner have, an enforcement order. So the builder/developer has an enforcement order against him to address the situation.
As well, and I have spoken with Denise Childs from DEP, who agrees with me that the commission should not hold the homeowner really accountable for buying a house which
Correct.
wasn't correctly advertised to him or correctly built according to the Wetland Protection Act, and that if we do need assistance, per se with fines or if anything, if the builder is not cooperative,
Correct.
that she would absolutely assist.
Okay,
Yeah, they're usually, when it comes to a wetland fill, they're usually quick to intervene.
Exactly.
And the fact that she's saying that is actually, I'm going to relay it to my client, because I'm also going to let my client know, in the blunt manner that I usually do, that I've had situations where Denise Child was asked to get involved, but because it was buffer zone and they were overburdened, she said no. So if she's saying yes to this for a wetlands fill, it means that she's viewing this from a different light.
correct. So I would request that for the September 24th meeting, is that right? If you could speak with Mr. Xeris and Mr. Coyview, is that correct? Angie? Coyview, okay. And see if we can get some sort of resolution going and come up with a plan. And do we want the homeowner to keep coming to our meetings?
If you'd like to, as a public meeting, you're more than welcome to come. If you'd like, if there's something that comes up, we can email, we've been communicating the whole time, so if you don't want to come to the next meeting but have, concerns that you'd like me to voice, you can always send me an email and I'll voice it for you.
Yeah, I mean, as the commission, I think we're not holding anything against you. Just legally, we have an enforcement order against you, for lack of a better term.
And that's mainly because if it had to, and it had to go to court, we'd have to, because you're the property owner.
Because you're the property owner. I just don't want to waste a lot of your time, because sometimes these things take time. this could take multiple meetings, so it's totally up to you. I don't want to put it this way, that I don't think you're bringing anything to the meeting other than getting information that you might be just getting frustrated about, so.
Yeah, I guess 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
So,
yeah, okay.
I would,
guess
you know,
we'll see how the meeting.
yeah, I mean, you know, I
Well,
think
I've
there's a plan.
been brought into this so that both parties can stop spinning around and we can just grab it and move forward.
Yeah, and
Because
that's
it's
what,
got to move forward.
that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, it's got to move forward.
And, you know, we're probably not gonna have a resolution by the 24th,
Oh, no, I wouldn't.
but at least if we can have the first step
Right.
into that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Angela can definitely keep you posted, and I just don't want to waste Tuesday nights of your time, even though I appreciate all the attention we get at these meetings, but, so. Is that okay with you, if Mr. Morrow kind of
Yeah, sure.
drives the ball on this one
Yep.
and see what we can resolve, so.
I'm home Thursday. Would you have a meeting? You have a-
It's 10 a.m. So if you want to come out and join us and talk,
You have
you're more than
permission?
welcome to.
Yep, you have permission to access my property now. Just knock on the door, let me know.
Okay.
I'll come up.
We appreciate it.
Thanks.
And,
Looks like that's a good day. Okay.
so, with that, any other issues we want to speak on that property? Okay, so we will continue DEP 199-1085, and we will continue 199-1086 for the September 24th meeting, along with the enforcement for 9 Penny Lane.
And before I go, guys, just a couple of quick things. Sawtell Road is on your agenda later. I will have a full-blown report ready for the next meeting. Actually, probably for next week, so you can get a preview on it.
Okay.
I'm basically going over that whole thing from cradle to grave, doing the soils analysis, the whole kit and caboodle, so that you guys have complete information.
Okay.
So I'm just not sure now whether it's going to wind up being an 8-page report or a 28-page report. It could go either way.
Okay.
And on the intermunicipal issue with Lunenburg and Fitchburg, Angela, I know I forwarded you
It's the Crawford Street.
the Crawford Street comment from DEP that they're going to want Mr. Alonso to file at least an RDA in Leominster.
Okay.
So, anything I can do with information, photographs, whatever, because I've got complete access to the site to support anything that they file with you, let me know.
Thank you.
Okay, I've been authorized by my chairman to do so.
And we will open and continue Orchard Hill Park, DEP 199-1083, and you asked for a continuance on that.
Please.
Till August 24th. Very good.
Thanks, guys.
Before you leave,
Yes, sir.
where are we with the gardener spot?
There was something brought to my attention on an action about 20 years ago, so I can no longer represent the gardener spot because apparently there was a determination that was very similar to an issue that you guys wanted worked on, that the forever ban would apply to me because of my former position with the Conservation
So
Commission.
you no longer represent
I
Mr.
can't.
Zanni.
I can't for that.
Do you know if he has other representation?
I can talk to him. I mean, I'll talk to him.
I think to kind of protect Mr. Morrow's reputation, I should probably be the one to communicate with Mr. Zaney.
Okay.
Thank you.
I didn't know where we were with any of that.
Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, obviously, you guys know my intentions were good on that, but, I mean, the law is the law, and once it was brought to my attention, I had to immediately excuse myself because, you know, I'm very careful when it comes to that particular item.
Thank you.
Are you anywhere else on the agenda?
No.
No? All right.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Chairman, take a minute.
Yes, we can take a 2-minute break. Thank you.
Yeah, let's go back to business.
All right, we are back. All right, new hearings. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40 as amended, there'll be a public hearing. Consider a notice of intent for Charles Doyle, prepared by DeRosa Environmental, for aquatic management program at Doyle Pond to control invasive common red growth utilizing treatment with US EPA/Massachusetts State Registered Aquatic Herbicides. The project is riverfront area and land underwater. Address 282 Day Street, map 564, parcel 85. Do we have a DEP file number yet?
Yes, the DEP file number is 199-1098. And I also just want to clarify, because in the legal ad, it had said the Phragmites management plan. It was supposed to be aquatic management plan, just due to an error on that OI.
Okay,
I've clarified it, and it's all set.
okay. Do we have someone representing the applicant?
That's me.
All
I
right,
prefer if I stand or face it.
that is totally up to you.
Okay. I'll stand. Okay. But thank you for having me, commission members. I'm glad to be here. My name is John. I'm with Salty Lake Management. We are working with DeRosa Environmental, and we are planning to do control of nuisance native or invasive vegetation at Doyle Pond. Our plan is to have a hydro rig come in, remove a lot of the organic material such as lily rhizomes and some cattails and dead leaf matter that has been forming along the bottom of the pond, which has been taking up water space. And after we remove the material, we use it with a hydro rake, which is a basically a pontoon boat that has two rotors on the side and like a 12-foot, I would say, backhoe, which would physically remove it. The plan is to launch it from the beach area of Mr. Doyle and place the organic material on his yard, and he will remove it and put it into a local disposery. My apologies. And then once the hydro raking is complete, the plan is to put in an aeration system which will help break down the excess organic matter that has been suspended and keep the water moving and help replenish dissolved oxygen levels. And then from there, within the following years, to conduct a management program involving either a once-a-month inspection or twice-a-month inspection to keep track of which aquatic submerged vegetation and algae is produced and how much there is, and to keep an eye on it to prevent it from getting to nuisance levels. And so basically the plan is to prolong the eutrophication process.
Okay. I'm just looking up Google Maps here.
So,
Commission members, questions?
yeah, on this pond, I know, like, when we've done other areas, usually we ask for, like, a map. Like, usually areas like where cattails are different, if there's stumps, it's usually on bigger, bodies of water, but areas that would be wildlife habitat. We don't necessarily want, chemical treatments, things like that. There's usually a 50-foot buffer between wildlife habitat and where things would be. So, can you kind of explain this pond? I mean, I'm looking at it here, but, do you have areas where there's like tree stumps, or I know in some areas we,
No tree stumps.
Okay. Because I know we've seen, like, even like areas where there's cattails is considered wildlife habitat because it provides, an area for different wildlife to.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the plan isn't to remove all of the cattails, is that correct? Yeah. To leave some, at least for habitat? Yeah, because we usually don't remove all of them. That's never our intention, but to always leave habitat for aquatic life to thrive. So I believe most of the cattails are at least in this section. Here's another copy of one of these, yeah, here.
Yeah, that was it.
I'm looking on Google Earth here. And to the, where I guess the area that's more vegetated, what is that? Meaning, you have a big section of open water, and again, I don't know how old this Google map is right here, but you have a lot of open water, and then, I don't know if that's to the west of the pond. It looks like it's in high water. It could become water, and kind of the left side of this blue on your map here. What is that? Is that marshy? Is it, can you walk on it? Can you,
That was all,
like, what is this?
when I bought that, that was all water.
This all,
Okay.
because it looks like there's trees there.
So this is all kind of cattails?
Yeah, and that was.
That's what I'm
all-
saying, like,
That was
see-
all water, that's probably low.
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
all
this is
water,
just-
'cause you can see where the water, where it came in, but this,
Right.
this was all 100% water when it.
So this was all water, and now
Yeah.
it's just kind of getting overtaken
Yeah.
by vegetation?
Yeah, vegetation, algae,
Now, is that where the focus of this treatment's going to be?
no, because
I believe the hydrogen that might be the focus.
you can see right here, algae, lilies.
Right,
Just
okay.
taken all over the place there.
Okay.
Yeah, the intention with the management program as well is to make sure it still stays a, I want to say valid, ecological, successful pond to make sure that the aquatic life can thrive.
Now, these hydro rakes, do they, I mean, you described as a backhoe. I mean, you're not dredging the pond.
Oh, no.
It's more like a York rake. It's like a rake. It doesn't
Yeah.
have a bucket on it where you can dig stuff up. But you
Yeah.
can reach down.
It'll be forked and not cupped. It'll
Okay.
be forked, so we can just pick it up. The water will be replaced. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're just picking up the weeds?
Yes, it's
Pretty much.
basically
And it picks up
rake.
dead leaf
a
matter.
rake. It's like a big giant garden, but not a leaf rake, but a garden.
Maybe another picture here as well. That maybe not. Apologies. But yeah, it's like a backhoe rake. Should have been better clarification. My apologies. So yeah, it'll scoop it up, kind of fork it out, and lift it up, bring it back to shore, drop it off, shake, etc. Repeat.
What kind of aeration are you thinking of doing?
This is what it looks like.
That would probably be
I thought it was all of you.
vertex aerator
And
system.
it's kind of looks like-
So the plan is probably to put in 3 different diffusers and to get enough energy, obviously, in the air to pump out to get enough area to be moving
Okay.
a majority of the water.
So it's just going to be kind of the standard waterfall?
Yes,
kinda-
standard, like it's near the
It'll
bottom and
it
it'll bubble
won't
up.
spray up. It'll just aerate.
Oh, okay,
Won't be a
so
fountain.
it's not going to be like a fountain?
Yeah, it will be submersed.
Okay.
It's just the
It'll be
hydrant.
underwater.
solid.
It'll bubble
You can
up.
see it's just a rake and it pulls it out.
It'll be pretty silent, so there won't be a lot of noise pollution either. And there are sound kits as well
Yeah,
to
I
make
actually
that
don't know.
less
Like,
of a sound pollution pollutant.
That's,
This is, so,
just like a big,
yeah, so they're doing this, I think, I know they had to do some of this kind of stuff at Barrett Park just for water quality.
Right.
Same, yeah.
Yeah. Especially, it looks like you don't really have flow here, it's kind of a dead end.
Yeah, it'll help.
Yeah, it flows the majority of the,
Yeah. But I mean, it doesn't flow out, you don't have an outlet, right? Is there an outlet at the end of the inlet?
yes.
So let me ask, how does the herbicide treatment stay in the pond? If we've got flow out, you have a filtration system, how are you gonna keep it there? I'm just looking
Some
at this
there really
map.
isn't a flow out unless we have a raised, a large raise. It's, and then in the winter, basically the same thing. It's rain, basically, is the only time we're gonna have anything over. And even in some rain, there's nothing still going out because it's being fed from basically on the other side of Lincoln Street. It's all that marshland in there.
Yeah.
And then eventually comes from, some of it comes from Whalen. And a large amount of storage between Whalen and this property.
So could you tell me a little bit about the treatment itself? The application, the length of time, how much treatment is going in? Do you measure that by poundage?
It obviously would depend on the herbicide or algicide used, but a majority of the algicides and herbicides that are used are liquid, and we obviously calculate based on acreage to treat half of the water body to make sure that it's not over-treated and so that other aquatic life can thrive. And it will depend on whether it's submerged vegetation, what kind of submerged vegetation it is, which herbicides are on the permit as well. But usually it's for specific treatment of specific plants, and it'll be almost like it's targeting those plants. And we use enough to dose to, I guess, take care of the plant, to put it lightly, and make extra room to take out whether it's invasive or if it's a nuisance to knock it back.
Length of time?
A typical application dependent on water body size. So this pond doesn't look too big, but also not too small either. I would say roughly an application would take between a half hour to 45 minutes, depending on any mishaps or equipment breakage.
What would be the length of time that the herbicide is active in the water body?
That's a good question.
Or that would probably be on the cut sheet for the herbicides. I don't know if you got the comments from DEP. They were asking for more information anyways on the herbicides restrictions, brand application.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of times they use like, I know they were, a lot of times they use like Roundup, I think it's like 10,4-D or whatever, I don't know, 2,4-D, whatever it is. But the issue we had over here, they were proposing it is, if you can't contain the water and if you can't stop the flow of herbicides from leaving the pond, then you really shouldn't be treating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we need to make sure that you can stop all flow from the pond and that there's no herbicide leaving that pond. Because Lake Samoset was able to do it because they had a dam, so they could draw down a little bit and stay below.
It was like, I think there's a dam.
Is it there?
Yeah, it was like a big.
With a spill.
So you could draw that down and,
Absolutely.
okay.
Because we don't want to treat the stream downstream, we want to treat the pond.
Right.
And that's.
So do you, I'm assuming.
You don't want to put it on that.
I don't get any benefit.
No, it's got to be contained.
So that's one of the questions about flow and why we're concerned about that.
Yep.
Is, you know, we want to address the correct herbicide, but we want to make sure we're treating just pond in question and not.
Yeah,
Right.
to kind of chime in on that question as well, the two major, I guess, herbicides or algicides that we use are chelated copper, which is more so for the algicides, and that's a one-day restriction on everything, which I believe is why we use it as much, because it's less of a threat. And then the most that I've seen on one of the more common herbicides we use is a 5-day restriction, and that is, I believe, more so for ornamental plants and like tomatoes, etc. But we still put down the 5-day restriction at max.
So we'd be looking at containing the water for a period of 5 days minimum, if you're using a higher dosage.
Angela, what's the comments from DEP besides more information on the herbicide?
One of the comments I have already addressed with Rose Environmental, just about updating and correcting the NOI, as well as they had questions on if there will be temporary impacts to the bordering vegetated wetlands with the hydro rake's access to the pond, which I think they'd be minor, if anything.
Sorry.
With the hydro rake having getting into the pond, if it would damage any of the wetlands around the area.
You said you're going to go through your beach.
Yeah, so.
Is this the beach that I see on this little Google Earth thing?
I would assume so.
Well, I can see the pond. I just don't know which. I'm assuming this is your. Property.
Yeah, they're pretty
Sorry,
similar.
the beach.
They're
Okay.
like,
So it'd be going across your lawn and into the beach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that where the boat is parked?
Yeah, it looks like there's a little yacht there.
Oh, we're talking about yachts?
and then they had a question about the compressor cabinet, where it would be located.
That'll be on Mr. Doyle's property as well.
Upland?
Yes,
What do you mean?
far enough from the water.
It's gonna be up near the house.
Up near the house, okay. And then they had requested a plan, kind of like the commission was discussing with you, that would show the coverage and the species of the plants existing in the pond and the proposed areas of treatment and the treatment type for those areas, proposed location of the aeration system, and any areas of the pond that will remain untreated. And a rationale should be given for the percentage of open water versus native aquatic plants that will be achieved by the plant management program. Specifications should be provided for aeration system. And then the multiple chemicals are proposed in this NOI. They just want to know kind of like a schedule and the calculations, and how you guys are going to evaluate their success. And then additional information, kind of like the cut sheets and the safety information on the different bacterial additives. And I can forward you a copy of their comments as well. So I don't see your name. I see Chuck and Michael on here.
What's the timeline you guys are looking at for this?
Yesterday.
We still need to schedule a site walk too. I haven't had
Yeah,
a
I don't
chance
know.
to.
That's fine.
Yeah, we like to use general and broad terms like fall.
Okay. So kind of, you want to start kind of as soon as, I know with aquatic treatments, a lot of times it depends on,
Oh, that's more of a future.
Yeah, you want that during the grow when they grow.
well, that's what I'm saying, like, what's,
Oh, that's the plan for like 2020.
Okay, so I
like,
mean,
in the
but you
future.
want to start with the raking and some of the other
Yeah, so
stuff.
the
sooner than
intent is
later.
to start with the raking, and then once that is finished, to get the aeration system in while, no plants, and then the following season, start implementing the treatment management program.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the one thing I've seen, like Samus said, basically just turn into a swamp over the years. So I understand, what you're trying to do. But there are areas where plants do develop that do provide habitat to wildlife that we really need to protect. And, we want to balance water quality with that. And there are areas up here that look like, they might be wetlands, so we want to make sure that any of that hydro raking. So I think what we need to do is we need to have a clear delineation of what is the bank of the pond, what's wetland, and then where the species are that you want to treat.
Yes.
Which is, and I guess, in the state's looking for how you're going to treat it. Are you going to hydro rake? If you're going to put a chemical, are you going to use 10,4-D? Are you going to use, some sort of copper, that copper product you were talking about? So I think we just sort of need a really detailed plan because, we want to make sure that what we're doing is going to, be a benefit and not, we don't want to, it's going to be great to have a nice, beautiful pond, but if it kills all the plants.
Our plan isn't to
fish,
make like
right.
a swimming pool.
No, I know, right, but I'm just saying, so we want that balance, so I think we just need that
If
comprehensive
it
plan.
helps, usually we would treat up to 50% of the water body. That way it would leave the other 50% to cope with it.
So I think if I may, Mr. Chairman, my suggestion would be to have a continuance so we can have a site walk. You guys can produce a kind of a drawing plan, something to kind of meet the commission's requests as well as the EP's requests, and then submit the cut sheets to me, and then we could reevaluate at the next meeting on the 24th.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Any other issues or
And then if
comments?
you guys agree with that as well, obviously, you guys have the decision on that, but.
Yeah, I think that, we definitely, most of the comments that, my biggest thing is, to sum it up, at least for me, is, what kind of chemicals are we going to treat, and then how are we going to contain them inside the water body? That's, in a nutshell, what I'd be looking for. DEP, I think, is looking for the same, but in a much more in-depth way.
Duration of the chemical, I think.
Yeah, what kind of chemicals you use, and,
Take back the fact that I didn't have a comment. The material that's, the material that's being taken out, you said was going to be deposited and then taken away to some mysterious place.
Yeah, sorry, I was very vague about that.
Yeah. I was wondering where exactly on the site is the dumping going to occur?
I believe it was mentioned.
So we're gonna bring it to the beach, and then have
Beach area?
Yes.
And you don't have an idea of exactly where you're gonna dispose of it. You're probably gonna bring it to a composting facility
Right,
or,
just, down there in the Jungle Road,
yeah.
something like that. And I think over there, Ron Club, Ron Leominster is also a dump site for debris.
Yeah, I'd like to know where it's going before we
Absolutely, and if
get rolling.
if they give us a couple options, and then on the day that they're removing it, I can go out there and supervise the removal and confirm that it's been put in the correct place.
The
If
best
the
case
commission would
scenario would
like.
be to have a truck right there, just put it in the truck and take it, rather than, you're gonna have to put some kind of containment around it.
Yeah.
We can talk about that
We
later.
can evaluate that, yeah. On the site, we can take a look at the site conditions.
Would you like to have a site walk prior to the
Yes.
September 24th meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Send out a doodle.
I will send it out.
I'm not gonna be at the next one, so I think we'll be fine with the forum.
We will have 4 members.
Huh?
As it will have 4 members, I've been keeping track.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for your John.
So do you guys have everything you need from us at this point?
So I think I'm gonna send him a copy of the DEP comments, and we'll communicate about that and addressing them and say at the site visit, just seeing you guys there.
Okay. Sounds good. So we'll continue it to the September 24th meeting. And we'll be by to take a look at your property and our pond, or your pond, I
And for
should
the
say.
site visit, would everyone like to be there, or just John from Solitude, or sometimes?
I can make it easier.
Okay. I just want to make sure I include everybody.
We're good?
So this will be
I have a
continued.
copy of a certified mailing as well, if you guys need that.
I do need that.
Okay.
Thank
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Who else is left in our audience here?
1 second, just to evaluate real quick. Mr. Ruggles from Whitney Carriage.
Okay.
So,
New business day.
yes, so I'm just gonna preface really quick, Mr. Ruggles. One of the commissioners had contacted me after the last meeting where we had voted on the RDA for the chimney cleaning and the masonry cleaning. And it was brought to my attention that the cut sheet and the safety sheet that we were given was not the complete safety sheet from Fire Clean, which could have possibly been an error because when you look on the website, they have it in 4 different segments. And it actually states specifically not to use it in waterways or near waterways or underground systems. So I discussed it with the DEP, and they felt that they'd have to change their filing because we spoke about it at the meeting, and we kind of agreed that this was the chemical. We evaluated the chemical they were going to be using on the RDA, and you can't amend an RDA. After some discussion with Mr. Ruggles, the state in Whitnam and Bingham, Mr. Ruggles has decided to forego the cleaning because they believe they can get it clean enough and they can protect the area with the erosion controls that were discussed before. We just kind of wanted as part of the record in the meeting minutes that they were going to forego the cleaning.
What do you mean by forgoing?
The cleaner, sorry.
The cleaner.
I need coffee.
The detergent.
The detergent,
Okay.
thank you, sorry.
So the
coffee.
Raymond's told us there'd be 90 to 95%, and that's what I presented in the meeting, is 95% of it was pressure washing and steam cleaning.
Right.
And now finding out that the Eco Clean, which is not,
Fire
is not
It's not
Eco,
very
it's some other kind of, means something else, apparently. I was as surprised as you were to hear about it. We're apologetic to have introduced that. That last 5%, Raymond James Sementini is a preferred vendor with Worcester. He does historic preservation projects. He works with numerous National Park Service consultants, and so we're a National Register property. We will be under the burden of meeting the National Park Service guidelines for this. And they are recently accepting projects and asking that none of it use the cleaner, but this is all pretty recent stuff. 95% is pretty good for us. So we're just thinking it'd be a lot easier way to go just to not do the detergent.
So basically just do the
Power
normal
washing and
cleaning
steam
with
cleaning
all the
only.
erosion controls, I
The
guess,
erosion controls we
and all that,
discussed.
just without the detergents.
I did submit the cut sheets for the filters.
Yes, you did, yes. I have those.
Okay.
I just wanted the inform the commission of the change as well as have it in the record.
Okay.
We had this discussion to protect Mr. Ruggles.
So what do we have to do as a commission at this point?
We just had to vote to accept it.
Okay. But you just said we couldn't change it.
Well, then they would have to file a new request for
Okay.
determination of applicability if you guys chose not to accept
Yeah.
it.
So if we vote to accept it, then he's okay.
And I think this is the best way to go. I think you have time,
Yeah.
commitment. They've been very communicative with me.
Okay.
Been able to work with me on this. I'm very responsive, so.
All right. Commission have any discussion on this? We happy? You okay with this?
I'm fine, I think.
Everybody okay with this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we accept the presented change, that there be no chemical use and power washing and steam cleaning only.
All right, do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
All in favor? You're all set.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate your patience.
Coming back in.
Thank
Sorry for the long meeting.
We'll talk tomorrow. We had that,
Yes, but I saw the
filing.
DEP number came
Yeah,
in.
okay, so maybe we can chat.
Good catch, good save.
Somebody else did that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll talk about Roach Ave, is that's
Yes,
okay with the
it's
commission?
Can we skip Roach Ave? That's
Yeah. All right, 19 Roach Ave. Do we have someone representing that site?
Sure.
Like, I'm not sure. Still here?
I'm always here.
Honorary member.
Honorary member at this point. Chris Anderson, Hannigan Engineering. Go figure. Peter Benzie, Pierce Pond Realty Trust was supposed to be here. I don't know where he went. We filed an RDA and a notice of intent for the reconstruction of an existing building. Just a little backstory. He purchased the property, was going to utilize it as like a construction house during construction for the subdivision. And evidently the people who used to live there were hoarders. So as he started ripping material and crap out and putting it in dumpsters, he found out that the floor was actually about a 10-inch delta from the front to the back. Unsafe, everything whatnot. So we tore down the structure, the superstructure, but the level stone foundation in place. So we filed 2 filings. One is the RDA for the superstructure. It's above the floodplain compensation or the floodplain area. So there's no real direct alteration to resource areas. It's exclusively buffer work. That includes no earth disturbance because we're just building and framing on top of an existing stone foundation. And then the notice of intent portion of everything, which is the second component, takes in a little more detail into the overall development of the project. So that's the process that we're going to go through.
So this was originally going to be under enforcement because it was brought to my attention as an enforcement issue a Friday afternoon, July 5th. I was alerted that house had been, not the correct word, but demolished right there on Roach Ave. So I stopped by, you could see that there was a house there at one point. It was taken down, but just the Millstone Foundation was there. I had met with Chris, Mr. Mahan, as well as Mr. Benzie and his son, Mr. Benzie, on the site to discuss the plans. I do know there's some concerns kind of going around whether or not it's whether or not it's jurisdictional, because technically they're not disturbing any soils, but they are 30 feet away from the edge of water. So after discussions with Hannigan Engineering and Mr. Benzie, they had decided to go with the RDA route. And Mr. Benzie had wanted to discuss with the commission a little further some of his plans. But I think just because of the length of the meeting, he probably had to go home.
So the Fieldstone Foundation they're gonna just build a new house on an old Fieldstone Foundation?
Yes, there's an stamped engineered letter from Mackenzie Engineering stating that it is all set to go. I have a copy of it from the building department.
There's some footings and concrete walls, and I guess I know structural, but I'm not a structural.
Yeah.
And Mackenzie says it's good. We work with Mackenzie all the time, so
Yeah.
I got to put my faith in them.
The second phase of the project includes groundwork.
Yes.
Yes, that's what the
Within 30
NOI.
feet. Oh, you have an NOI?
Yeah,
Yes, I just received it yesterday.
Oh, okay. Because I was under the impression that it was going to be contested, that it wasn't a wetlands issue or something.
Yeah, it was.
We're not denying that there's wetland issues all over that place. We're just, the superstructure is not in the, it's in the buffer zone, but not in the wetland. Right, sir.
And I think there was kind of a disagreement whether or not it's an existing house, and so it's kind of easier just to go the RDA and NOI route for the work, in my opinion. So I just know Mr. Benzie had wanted to discuss it, and unfortunately he had to leave, so.
Mr. Levenzi, I let him know that the meeting changed around. He may be able to make it back.
Okay.
For what it's worth.
Okay. I guess what's the timeline or sequence of events at this point?
I guess
So maybe-
Yeah, you can go.
So this will be on for the next meeting on the 24th.
Okay. As what?
Yes. Well, the RDA and the NOI, so I'll take it off of communications. Because that was just there just because it had been requested. Is that
I guess I'm a little confused because this might be the first time that we've had an RDA and an NOI at the same site together. I mean, we've had RDAs and then,
Why wouldn't you just do an NOI for the whole thing?
right, I guess that's my question.
Do they just not want the house tied to an RDA?
They want to get,
I mean,
they want to start framing
NOI.
before the snow starts flying. That's why.
I guess that's my
That makes
question.
sense.
And that can go
absolutely makes sense.
concurrently while the notice of intent process goes through, because this is a little more, the notice of intent's a little more involved.
So that's what I guess that's my
Yeah,
thing.
the
So
intent is to get the ball rolling so they can get
is-
the house
is to
framed,
basically come in and say, hey, we need an RDA for the house so we can build a house.
Yeah.
and then cut.
But in the meantime, but at that point, we're not going to touch decks.
Well, there's an existing deck, but the deck's going to stay in place right now.
Yeah, but I mean, just nothing other than the framing of the house.
Correct.
And then you're going to, well, like you said, concurrently, we can do an NOI because you're 30
Because the
feet
NOIs
from
are
the
taking probably a meeting or two,
park. Right.
so and because DEP is being overwhelmed at this point in time,
Okay.
it might take a while. That's our concern. Snow's starting to fly soon, so we want to get the,
Not to
say that.
complicate things, but how do you frame and build a house that's 30 feet from wetlands
I think we're starting to
without
get through.
storing materials in a wetland?
So the way the site is, the front of the site, when you're driving down Road Jab, I'm not sure, I'm assuming you've been there.
Yeah, I think
It was the house on the left, I think it was yellow.
It's the rundown one, right?
It was, yeah, I think it was yellow at the time.
Right
And so they
before
had
the
like a little
project,
parking
exactly.
area, and I
Right.
think, I want to say the retaining wall, measuring with my eyes, was probably like 4 feet down, and it's like a drop down, you can walk down 4 steps. So from my discussions with Mr. Vivens, the idea was to kind of keep everything
Up in the street.
up in the street area. They'd be, you know,
Okay.
working, obviously, they'd put the floorboards down, assuming for framing, kind of walk around, frame the house as they go and build up. They weren't gonna disturb any of the soil.
So they don't need any kind of fork trucks or lifts or anything like
I
that?
think it'd be nearly impossible to get it down that slope without having,
Yeah.
really.
Okay.
It would be a neat to
I'm like, I think that'd be very impossible to do. If it happens, it's not on purpose.
And we have bigger issues at that point.
Okay.
So that was,
So on the 24th meeting, we should be expecting both RDA and NOI.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hanning will be here for that one.
you don't want to hang up.
You don't want to come from that. You've had enough of us.
I'm going to play in Gardner that night.
Okay. Any other discussion? No. Okay. Anything else for us? If Mr. Bevenzi comes, we can address
Just-
that.
Since Chris is here still,
Yeah.
I was hoping we could skip to enforcement B.
We can, if you'd like to stay. All right. Any
It's always
issues?
fun listening to you guys.
We don't have to say.
Any issues skipping to that? All right. Enforcement B, 909 Elm Street. Plans to share. What's that?
Yeah, so I had, I set up the plans that I have in my office. But basically, the real issue with this one is that this would come under enforcement back in April for the retaining wall, or not retaining wall. That was disturbance in the
Watch. Well,
it's in the watershed protection district, yes, as well as the buffer zone, which was our main focus. Originally, we had decided, since he was willing to work with us under the enforcement order, that we weren't going to require them to file an NOI, but the commission never issued an enforcement order. We just issued a cease and desist. So I had the enforcement order written up, so the commission just needs to sign it because they're working with the planning board, which they can't do any work anyways until they have their approval. But just to kind of get going on removing the area, stabilize the area before winter comes. I think it'd be a lot better to work under an enforcement order and get them sooner rather than later. We'll have to wait for an NOI and engineer plans for the replication area that's being proposed. I do have plans that show the area where they're, not replication area, the restoration area, the riverfront area, and the buffer zone, and how they're gonna move the wall out of the area and out of our jurisdiction.
and that's where Hannigan Engineering comes in for the NOI.
Yes, because they're not for the NOI, but they're representing them, I believe, for the planning board. They did the plans for the planning board.
Yeah, so when we last met, I can't believe it was April, We hadn't done a full site survey yet and the delineation, so we went out, we located everything. There is a small portion, the first like 50 feet of the, I don't know if you know the property, but you have a giant culvert bridge system about 100 feet down the roadway. And then you have the riverfront and everything like that. So what happened was Mr. Liette didn't realize he was within the 200-foot riverfront area because nobody ever told him. Because back when he did his original project, he came back before the commission and everything like that, but the wetland scientist and the permitting engineer, who were not us, didn't flag the other side of the road. So in reality, a small portion of the riverfront area started encroaching up into his property and whatnot. So he didn't realize that because nobody ever knew until we got involved because he was doing work in the watershed protection area. So we were like, let's go out and figure out where everything lives. So there's a small portion that he kind of regraded between his house and the, there's an access drive that goes into the reservoir area out back that he was moving dirt and storing stumps in and everything like that. I think at this point he's removed the stumps and a lot of the tree matter.
He's cleaned it up a lot.
Yeah, so we've cleaned it up, so now it's just pretty barren earth. It's our intent just to loam and seed that again. There's a wildlife seed mix that we can use, plant a couple of white pines or something like that in that area, just to clean it up. He doesn't want to use it at the end of the day. He understands that it's within the riverfront area, can't use it anyway and whatnot, so it's just clean it up, put some plants in it, get it restabilized, reestablished. There's some encroachments onto the easement for the city and clean that up. But all the work that's being proposed underneath the Watershed Protection Act, or sorry, Watershed Protection Zone under this zoning ordinance is located outside of the buffer zone by quite a bit, so that's why we're not filing full notice of intent with you guys.
And it's moving the wall, or the rocks,
It's a boulder.
the boulders.
Boulder
slow as a lot of rock there.
The,
Now, I mean, I know it's not necessarily our jurisdiction, but if they're looking for comments, was that what? Though in the water supply protection district, I don't think they're supposed to alter the elevations, and it looks like between those walls being built, and it appears that they've changed the elevations.
It's not so much that, it's
The grades, they
the
don't want the
grading
grades.
and everything like that, so that's one of the things we're going back in front of DPW, because DPW is kind of driving this boat relative to compliance and everything like that, and we talked with them, and they're okay with what our intent is.
But I mean, ultimately, whatever is done has to get approved by the planning board. So I mean, my concern is, we've got an area that, where they've changed the elevations and the grades in an area that's under the protection of the city, and the reason they put those in is because they don't want erosion into areas that, surrounding our drinking water.
so the department, the conservation department, we do, as part of the planning board process, they do site plan review, which is, and it's not site plan review, but they send out review sheets for all the department heads to fill out after they review the plan. It's why I have access to the plans, as well as Mr. Anderson has provided them to me. So I'm able to make comments on it. I believe the commission stopped commenting on that because a lot of the work that the planning board is approving is not in their jurisdiction. I believe that was end of Joanne's term here, beginning of Marco's. I believe those suggested that the commission should not be voting on comments. But if you have comments you'd like, you can email them to me and I can forward them to the planning board, or I can add them into
My concern is, even though it's out of our jurisdiction, I mean, we had erosion into a resource area, so it is our jurisdiction. So even though the area is outside of it, the activity is not.
Yeah, and we were the ones that originally kind of caught this issue, so I have been in communication with Elizabeth and the planning director, and we've been working together on the watershed protection.
But I mean,
district.
it should be made clear though that it is our jurisdiction because of the activity it was.
And
Not
as part of that filing, we have to provide the erosion control plans that we're doing, and so. Is something there, or am I losing it?
I don't see anything.
Thanks. Yeah, so as part of that filing, we provide all our erosion control measures, our practices. We're doing a small drainage swell to try to capture some of the runoff coming off the site, putting some check dams and everything like that. We're going to reestablish all the erosion control around the limit of the projects and put some hay bale check dams along the roadway, because inevitably something's going to get down there, and we're going to try to capture it inside that gutter flow to capture everything. And we know, yes, there was erosion issues back when he was doing it, because unfortunately, he didn't realize that what he was doing was a big no-no. But
Well, I mean, he was doing the same thing when he had his notice of intent, and we said,
Yeah.
don't do it, and, so, I mean, he did know, it's just he didn't want to acknowledge it. It's better than ask to figure this, I understand.
So we're
So that's-
working through the process now.
Okay.
So the commission just needs to vote to issue an official enforcement order, and sign it, because I know we discussed it, and then they were coming back, and then we decided to let them work on the enforcement order, but actually issuing, we had a cease and desist over there.
Okay. So do I have a motion to issue an enforcement order for 909 Elm Street?
I'll make a motion to issue an enforcement order for 909 Elm Street.
Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? All right. You're excused unless you have another hearing.
Are you here for essential treatment?
I'm leaving now.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. All right, let's start at the top. Certificates of compliance, 141 Lincoln Street, DEP 199-1072.
Yes, so just to refresh the commission's memory, this was the site where the neighbor was having a pool installed, and they were taking the dump trucks and they were putting on their property to kind of spread it out and extend his property. They have finished the work. I did go out to the site with Tom Christopher and Mr. Cosenza and look at the site, and it's stabilized. They've removed all the fill and they've spread it out, as discussed at the site walk, further up and farther away. There's actually vegetation popping up there. I wasn't able to get my phone to hook up to the computer to print out the images.
Is the stuff they removed, I'm not super concerned with the vegetation in the wetlands, only in the matter of it was relatively flat, so as long as there's vegetation growing, I would hope that it's going to continue to grow. My biggest concern was where they put the stuff
So this is how high the
up
fill
out
was
of
on
the,
time.
is that not going to wash down? Because I remember that site being,
It's all been taken out.
there was a slope and then it was flat, so,
Yeah, it's fine.
I mean, it's going to take a while for the wetlands to recover itself.
Yes, so the wetlands actually are extremely well recovered. I'll walk around, like that's how high the fill had been up to.
Yeah.
It's already starting to vegetate.
Now, did we have any kind of monitoring, wetland monitoring? Like sometimes when there's wetland disturbance, we want it monitored, for growth for two growing seasons. So that's why I want to make sure before we order a certificate of compliance.
I cannot remember.
I don't believe we did. I can go, I don't have the order of conditions, I can run to my office and grab it.
I mean, before we order, issue a certificate, I'd like to know that we didn't
Is that the
require
wetland?
Yeah, this is
monitoring.
the wetlands here, but I believe it wasn't.
Boilerplate? I thought we did.
That's,
Because
I
this would
believe
be
it
considered a
is.
wetland replication, because they filled it and they took the material out. It would be-
But from I think from our discussion, it wasn't actually physically in the wetland, it was in the buffer zone right up to the wetland.
I thought it was in the wetland, on that side. I believe it was in the wetland. Because we made them take it out by hand. We didn't want equipment in the wetland.
I'm just gonna run to the office and just grab it real quick, just to make it easier for everyone. I should have brought it.
Can I look at your pictures on your phone while you're running?
I wouldn't give my phone to him.
So, here, that's how high the fill had been up and that way. Here's my mileage report, stop.
Yeah, so it says fill in rock debris that was placed in the wetland in buffer zone was removed. So it was material in the wetland.
Well, it was, I saw it.
Yeah.
We were on the site looking at it.
So yeah, it says it right here that it was, so.
I mean, the wetland looks very vegetated. I guess we need to find out, is that looks like the upland where it was placed.
Yeah.
That's where it's supposed to go, up on that slope.
Yeah, the first picture, there's some silt fencing. I think that might be,
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's considered replication. I mean, they had to remove soil and match grades and.
I think it was in the wetland.
Yeah, it says it right in the
Does it?
paperwork that it was.
Looks pretty stabilized.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, it's definitely revegetated, or,
But I mean, the thing is, if you don't, you need to monitor, because if you get the wrong species in there, if you're not getting the correct wetland species, it could get overtaken by.
Wasn't that when we updated the boilerplate, that we added that?
I believe so.
And I think this might have been before, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it could have been.
I don't know.
Yeah, it says right in the filing that it wasn't a wetland.
I remember there was a discussion about the 2-year growing period this year at Congress.
That picture on there with these, with silt fence, is that the up, that's the.
That's the upper area where they've,
Okay.
so they did remove it, but they weren't replicating any area. And the way our boilerplate is
Well-
worded is for wetland replication area.
Well, it was restoration. They basically had to dig it out, they have to bring it back to grade,
Yeah.
and then they have to monitor the growth to make sure that we have wetland vegetation coming back.
I'm just trying to see this in here. It's on the last page. Where our order of conditions doesn't, it specifies strictly wetland replication areas, which are a little bit different than restoration.
Right, because you're not
So-
replicating them somewhere else, we're just
Yeah.
restoring it. Yeah, it's a play on words, but it is very different.
And I don't,
I mean, just, honestly, it is different.
or it is heavily grown in.
Replication is removing something that wasn't wetland and making it wetland.
All right, so did they provide documentation as to the species and that the wetland has been, like, if we're not gonna monitor it, we just wanna make sure that the species that are growing in there
Right, I know what you're saying.
There
are
are
wetland
wetlands,
species,
not
and
uplands.
because if they don't have the right elevations,
Right.
eventually, upland plants are just gonna take over.
Right.
So we need to know that the elevations match and that the vegetation, wetland vegetation that are in there.
Request letter, no?
I mean, everything else looks, this looks fantastic, everything
Yeah,
else.
it just doesn't have the actual.
Yeah, the wetlands
It doesn't have like a data sheet, a wetland data sheet.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Can we ask Christopher Environmental to
I'm sure.
give us a wetland species or?
It's an evaluation.
Like
of
They
the
do the
wetland
plots and
report, yeah.
stuff, and they just say, hey, and we got these species to grow, and the elevations match.
Right.
Yeah.
Existing.
Yeah, I'll talk. He was supposed to be here tonight, but unfortunately he had his meeting tonight as well, so I will communicate with him and request that we can continue this to the next meeting.
Took them a while to do that, huh?
It's,
Lot of time.
There's a lot of fill there.
Project. There was a lot.
But it did come out, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's most definitely stable, which I think is key.
That's the most important, and I know they want their COC, but if we could get your report that you want, I think that's.
Yeah, I think the wetlands are the part where we care about. I mean, I don't really,
As long
it's
as-
great that the upland is
Well,
stable.
the upland, as long as the upland's stable, that's all I care about.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, the upland is
wetlands-
very stable. There's some very interesting growth happening.
Yeah, so, okay, if you can just leave that on and get some more information, we should be good.
So just the wetland data sheet.
Yeah, just to
Okay,
know
so
that
I'll
we
make
got,
sure.
the appropriate vegetation growth thing.
All right, communications, we talked about Roach Ave. 449 Wachusett Street, planning board would like to know the commission's concerns so they can address them on their September 16th meeting. If I can remember correctly, and correct me, ladies and gentlemen, if I can't, our concern, or I guess our ask to them would be, we would prefer them using an existing cart path, if you want to call it that, because we feel it is going to be less disturbance and less replication needed. And less impact to the area
Right.
than going around.
And if they talked about putting in some drainage, some piping underneath the car path,
To control.
which would actually link those two.
Hydrological control, yeah, connection.
Yeah.
So their permitting is much different than ours. Their means are run much different than ours. So I don't know if they can really agree, kind of like if someone came to us and said, hey, can I do this? I don't know if their board can actually agree to allow something without an application in front of them.
Okay.
So my discussion with her was kind of just trying to figure out, because from my understanding from the applicant was that the planning board said no, like that they couldn't use the cart path. So then I'd be better to go the other route, which is the wetland replication route. So my idea would be for the commission obviously to vote on me sending them a letter requesting clarification on what, why and what their choices were due to our concerns with the wetland fill, and then maybe I could write in, or we could write in, it would be beneficial for the area to use the cart path with a culvert underneath it, in our opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to avoid over 26,000 square feet of wetlands destruction is what we're trying to do.
Right.
That's not a small area, it's huge.
No, and I understand that there was some questions on that watershed, and is it part of the
Yes.
Wachusett, is it not part of?
I'm working with the state on that aspect. I did contact Miss Nancy McGrath from the state, and she said there is a corner in the westerly, she said it's a very minute, small corner in the westerly side of that property that's in the Wachusett rivershed, but she doesn't believe it'd be a problem. I have to
We'd have to
relay,
still-
I have to relay that to them and have them put that on their plans. I'm not
But we need to get there. If a portion of the property falls under MDC jurisdiction, we at least need to reach out to them for a comment,
yeah.
because we don't want to do something without them being notified.
Okay.
But is that
Is,
in our jurisdiction, though, since we don't handle the watershed technically? Wouldn't that be under the planning board? So maybe I should add that in the
They would be
letter?
listed as an abutter. They'd be technically an abutter. Or as a board, I think you
Yeah,
reach
I
out.
understand that. I just don't want to overstep.
is the planning board aware that there's an existing cart road
Yes.
through the water there?
Yes.
And are they aware that the applicant is trying to take the easiest path out by going into the wetlands? And he said that at the meeting, so we're trying to take the
Yeah.
easiest out here.
I believe so.
I think the easiest out is going
I
on
do
the
have
existing
their
road.
review, their site plan review, as well as the application that was given to the planning board in my emails. I just received that today, so I've been kind of going through that.
Yeah.
So did the planning board not reach out to DCR? Is nobody?
I don't know that answer if they reached out to them or not, so maybe that'd be a question.
I
for
can
them
ask
for-
DCR.
Yeah, you can ask them.
I mean, that's something we can ask if the planning board notified.
Yeah.
From my understanding, from my conversation with Nancy, was that they wouldn't really have to be involved.
If the
Because
property's
they
in
don't own
mention.
the property though, that's the thing, it's at the other end from what she was saying. It's the west, so that's why I wanna see
Yeah.
where it is in the map, because if it's like
Yeah.
over on the other end of the golf course,
Right,
I don't think
but
it's
that's what I
really
mean.
gonna be
If a portion of this property falls under their jurisdiction, then they should be
at least
notified.
informed.
Right. All right.
It's like if something was in Fitchburg, but it was in Leominster's drinking water supply protection district, we'd like to,
Yes,
we would hope that we would be notified to have comment on it.
I think that could happen first.
Right. All right. Anything else that you would like included? Do you know what this commission would like included in that letter, formal letter to the
I think would be
planning board?
my thought, from my understanding is want clarification on their permitting and what they approved, as well as the reasoning why. Explanation of our concern for the wetland replication area and why the commission feels that the culvert, using the existing cart path and having a culvert in the road would be the best method, as well as clarification on if their communications with DCR. And
Yeah,
regards to the
I would
watershed.
stress that we feel as a commission that route would be the least disturbance, which ultimately that's what I'm assuming what they want to get from
There
their
would still
watershed.
be some wetland replication,
But
it
a
would be
lot less.
minute.
It would be a lot less, and ultimately the reason you don't want to touch watershed is because that's the natural habitat of the land. Well,
Road's already there.
granted the road's there, and yes, we would be out of their jurisdiction if they did that road around, but you're disturbing so much more. It has a bigger impact on that watershed, I feel, from the permit that we saw than the cart path, you know? So.
It is the lesser of two evils.
Yeah,
I
just to
believe
save
it.
a permitting, you know,
Right,
to not have to file with somebody, you know, I mean.
and it seemed like it was
I think they
extremely,
still end up having to file with
Yeah.
it, but
yeah.
it was a different filing though.
And it was at the furthest reaches of that watershed as well. And it was very, very,
I don't know where they said, how many, 800 feet or something?
it was, yeah, it was quite a ways from that, so. All right,
So I vote on that.
do I have a motion to have our conservation agent draft a letter to the planning board with our comments as discussed here this evening?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Can you just send that out? Just, we don't have to have a big email discussion, just send it out.
Just
so
so
we
they're
can-
aware, catch any
Take a look. spelling
errors.
Yeah, you're a better speller than I am. If you went to kindergarten, you're a better speller than I am. Meeting minutes.
No,
I don't see no one listed here.
no, I did send out a copy for you to review, but I sent it out on Friday.
Okay.
I saw
So
it,
they're-
but it was pretty vague.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That was one of our very short meetings that we really didn't have too much discussion going
Right.
on.
It's a short meeting.
When was that? When was the last time we had a short
It
meeting?
was July, I think it was only like an
Yeah,
hour.
when I saw the adjournment, I thought, wait a second, that's not one of dance meetings.
I think Brad was
It
actually.
was 6:36, maybe you were absent.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, what time
I
is it
haven't had
now,
a chance to
midnight?
fully review it yet, but I want to send it out to you guys. If you guys had anything.
I did
Janice
review
still
it.
learning, so
Yeah.
she's trying to see
Okay,
how to do it. So
okay. Old business, how's our Manusnaug Brook?
it's holding up. It's retaining.
Did you have a chance to talk to the mayor about free cash available?
Unfortunately, I have not. I've been pretty busy in the office.
Okay,
But kind of an update, which kind of relates to this, is the MVP program. I was invited to be on the steering committee for that, primarily due to the new sock walls.
Okay.
Sorry.
what is the MVP program?
The Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program.
Okay,
So I'm in the steering committee so we can get all the projects and assess our different areas where we can use the money the best. So.
okay, perfect. Hopefully we
Can I ask a question on this? It hasn't been keeping me up at night, but if the golden egg was laid and we had the money to do all this work, does that also include the culvert that goes under Mechanic Street?
I'm not sure. I am not 100% sure if the city owns that culvert. I believe from discussion with someone who owns some of the property there that they own a portion of the culvert, so it's not really sure. I can go back and look at we had an engineer, Woodard and Curran had gone out and evaluated the site, so I could go back and double check. It was quite a while ago the last time I looked at it, if that was included in it.
So you're saying we're just concentrating on the wall, Jersey barriers, and the riprap that's in there to get all that squared
Yeah, well,
away?
the proposed plan, the $1 million plan, was to repair and reinforce the entire area, fix it, remove, get the flood compensation back in place. I know there was some images and some discussion about, upstream and downstream, how the culverts were older and may or may not need some work.
Right.
I just know there was a couple different options that the Woodard and Curran had given us. There was a $250,000 option. There was a couple $1 million option. So I'd have to go back and fully review it to answer that question.
Well, maybe on the steering committee you can bring that up.
Yeah.
Somebody should be looking at that culvert.
Absolutely.
It's pretty old.
all right. 375 Harvard Street, enforcement.
Yes. So I've met with Carl DeMassa quite a few times, as well as I've met with Chris from GBC Construction. I've gone out to the site. I was actually at the site yesterday, looking at the site, looking at the work they've done. They haven't put in the pond yet, but he did have some questions and concerns about the wetland replication area. It's heavily vegetated, and his concern was they have the sewer line, it's not using the septic area, and the wetland area that is closer to the road that's not a wet, there's disagreement whether or not it was a wetland or not a wetland, so it's leach field, is growing in very well. He had wanted to know if he could move his replication area to that area, rather than on the other side of the silt fencing, because his concern was that he was gonna go out there and cut down all the trees and, excavate and destroy this whole wetland where the leach field is to get down there, basically because all the machinery that would be needed, and he didn't want to, for lack of a better term, get in trouble for doing that to replicate the area if he could do it up here. I said I told him I would let the commission know, so they could have a discussion on it, as well as I would review the meeting minutes, because I believe this was discussed at one of the meetings. I can't remember if I haven't had time to.
I believe that location was chosen for a reason.
Yeah, so I really need to review it further, but I wanted, discuss with the commission. He kind of wanted the commission's opinion whether or not to do it or to do it, because he didn't want to
Well,
come
equipment
back and
won't
get in
be,
trouble.
well, no, equipment shouldn't be in a wetland, no matter what.
That's
I
the
mean-
only way for them to get down to where the replication area
Is
is,
to destroy another wetland?
where the leach field wetland is, yes.
And,
So that's.
during the meeting, I know it was discussed, and they said that they could do it. However, I don't know how, if it was from the top with a bigger
That's why I
piece of
have to go
equipment.
back and look and see, and
I mean, I know the commission wouldn't have said, oh, it's okay,
Yeah, to go
run
right there.
an excavator through a wetland.
Fix that one, yeah.
So there should be no equipment in a wetland, period.
We might have been talking about long reach excavators similar to what we were talking about from the new select board.
I don't know if the long range, I don't think it would reach where the work replication area is, because it's
No.
probably over 100 feet away from where the building is estimated, like from the
I
drive.
wouldn't be able to reach it from where they dug those test pits?
No,
No?
because it's on the other side. It's on the other side of where the leach field area is. It's kind of back on that area. I need to review it further before I'm comfortable giving an answer or recommendation, but I did inform him that the commission had felt that that area was a jurisdictional wetland. It was discussed as a jurisdictional wetland for these reasons. I don't think planting that would qualify or meet this performance standards for the replication area, but I would discuss it with the commission and review the filing.
Well, from my memory, they were under the impression that once the septic system was shut off and they were on city sewage, that was all going to dry up and it wouldn't be a wetland.
Yes.
So they've been connected for how long now?
It'll be a year in December.
And it's still pretty much looking like a wetland,
Yeah.
isn't it? I think maybe that's what they were thinking. They could just drive in through there because it would no longer be a wetland.
That's, I think, the discussion. I'm gonna, before I just haven't had time, it's been
But
busy.
even if you hadn't had water there in a year, you're gonna have hydrous soils, you're still gonna have
Sure.
a decent
Yeah.
percentage of wetland
And we've had a
species.
lot of rain,
Yeah.
so it's going to stay wet.
Yeah, if you
I
could,
just wanted to update the commission.
if you could review, yeah, it's been a
Don't want to
while.
go ahead and do it and then,
There was
get in trouble
a
with
number of
damages.
things on that site, so
yeah.
I remember the site walk, and at least when I was there.
They're able to do the wetland plantings basically now. So I just want to kind of get it cleared up. But make a call on it.
Yeah, if you could get us some more information, and we'll address it. I mean, if any information you can email to us, and
Yeah.
so we have a little bit more
I have a
education
feeling I
before
know
next
the
meeting.
answer. He just would want me to communicate it because he didn't want to get in trouble.
Okay. All right. Any information you can pass along to us, that'd be fantastic. Any other discussion? All right. Granite Street. As we discussed, Mr. Morrow was no longer going to be representing Mr. Zaney because of his lifetime ban. Can you address that with Mr. Zaney and ask him to either have another representative here or himself or whatever he feels comfortable doing, so we can address this drainage / irrigation that was being put in. And again, we still would like to discuss, I would like to discuss the conservation plan that was drafted and didn't really do what we asked it to do, so.
Right. This has been on the agenda for like a year, and there's been no action in a year.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know, just someone hiding behind this is the dirty side of farming, it gets old. And I think that we just need a discussion. You know?
Has anybody, yeah, I mean, have you, Angela, I'm not asking, well, I am asking you to do more work. Is there any, do you know anybody on the Department of Agriculture for the state? Do you know anybody at DEP that you could ask to steer you in the right direction? It'd be nice to get somebody from the Department of Agriculture to help educate us.
Yes, I don't know in specifically from the Department of Agriculture. You don't work there, right? No. Sorry, I was like, wait a minute.
Very loosely.
It's like I might know someone right here.
Agricultural resources.
That one. But I have discussed with DEP and, you know, basically it was, well, there's a lot of exemptions for agriculture,
right.
and whether or not it's right, I guess, they're still there. And so they said, you know, it's usually better to work with the farms.
Okay.
You know, there's certain things they absolutely cannot do, which we're well aware of. So I can reach out again and kind of explain the situation.
We're trying.
We're trying.
Right, we're trying to work with them. My biggest issue is there's regulations that I think all of us have read. I still currently have them in my home office. That the property owner is saying, I'm exempt, and I think more than one commission member, and I'll only speak for myself, disagrees with that I feel it's very clear that you are not exempt from this one particular activity that we found you doing. And he, you know, it's basically an argument of, you know, he's saying yes and we're saying no, and in the meantime, he did it, and it just kind of sits there. So I don't, you know, for lack of bringing it to court and asking a judge, I mean, we're just trying to get a better, I mean, the list is extensive of his exemptions, and I understand that, but at the end of the day, Larry's right. It's just, I'm exempt is not the correct answer, because he's not exempt from everything. You know, and that site, when it comes down to it, I mean, we went and looked at zoning, and it's zoned, you know, residential, agricultural, as is over, I think over 50% of Leominster is zoned residential. Yeah,
Quarter acre is.
It is zoned residential agricultural. Does that mean Larry can do anything he wants because he's zoned you know, what's agricultural and what's not? I mean, the front part of his property, as we all know, is more retail. He's not growing things in the front part of his property. It's no different than Home Depot. So is Home Depot agricultural because they're selling plants? You know, I get he has farmland, and you know, there's Gold's Farm and all these other farms around that. Yes, they are agricultural, but you know, does agricultural say he's exempt from every piece of his property, or is it just the farming area? You know, I mean, I don't know how big that site's. Pretty large. I mean, it's 20 acres, 30 acres, 50. I forget what it is. You know, is that mean everything contiguous there is
Like right out to Granite Street.
right out to Granite Street, right out to the brook? Is that agricultural? Because what we're talking about is not in the farming area; it's in the retail area. Right. All these issues we've been having is in the retail area. Is that agricultural? You know, you know, we keep talking about, you know, Home Depot as an example. I mean, they have a store, but outside they have the garden center. Well, does that make that garden center agricultural? Exactly, the answer is no. So does that make his retail area agricultural or retail? If it's retail, it's not agricultural. Those exemptions don't count in that area. I don't know. I don't know the rules.
The greenhouse is there, which I guess would be agricultural, but that, in essence, looks as though the contribution to the problem that we're looking at. I mean, the drainage is.
But even those, they're not exempt. I mean, they are allowed to do their activity, but they're supposed to notify the commission and the city before they do it. It's not that they can't do it. They just need to notify and, you know, let there be a discussion before they go ahead and just do it.
And I would like, if possible, a a third party, meaning the state agency, to advise us, not someone hired by the applicant in their favor to say, yes, this is this, and just maybe for my own knowledge and whatever,
It has to be an outreach person or that does this kind of stuff at the state. You'd think.
I'm looking. I'll work on finding someone who will maybe be helpful on this. I don't know if anyone from the agricultural department really knows wetlands. I don't know if anyone from the wetland department really knows
That's correct.
agriculture. So that's kind of like where the disconnect is. There's really not a person in between.
Right,
kind
but
of bridging
most,
gaps.
but I'm thinking most, but I don't know if, I guess we need some agricultural expertise first and foremost,
I might have some.
and if not, I just know from my personal thing, I mean, my nonprofit is under the agricultural department, so I had to go through about 10 different people, but within a day I was able to reach the correct person at the Department of Agriculture, so I think that's what we would like to see. And if you need some help, I'll see what I can do, if you want me to, and whatever. I don't know. This needs to stop, and if it means, one other thing Mr. Zaney has mentioned every time he's been here is it always seems to be his busy season, whether it was spring, summer, fall.
Right.
It's always been his busy season, and he can't be bothered because that's when he makes money. Well, that's why you have staff, and it's a Tuesday night, and I don't think you can roam too much at 8:30 at night. So I'm just kind of getting a little sick of, I can't make it because it's my busy season.
Or being ignored.
Yeah, so I don't want to put too much on you. I'm just telling you how I feel. So,
I understand.
If-
I'll work on addressing it by the next meeting.
yeah, if we can reach out, and if you just get bogged down, I'll see what research, and I can make some phone calls just to see if we can get some advice from the agricultural department. Not so much on the drainage, just if a person has agricultural, is it the whole, certain things like, is it the whole site, or is it just part of sites, or is it, how do you deal with a farm that has a farm stand, or how do you deal with that kind of stuff? And then we can
Just
try
kind of
to
advice on
bridge
both
that
ends.
gap, yeah.
I think it's educational.
Kind of more educational. I mean, if we're talking about him growing his plants up in the field, I understand that. Hey, the drainage is this, and they have exemptions, but everything, he's not growing anything where we're talking. He's basically watering plants that aren't growing. They're just getting there to be sold, so.
It might be nice to have somebody to ask questions about what was it?
Conservation plan?
Not the conservation plan, but that document that we got for the agricultural.
Yeah.
Oh, the
that's
actual
exactly-
fiscal
The
exemptions
actual,
that he brought in.
Right, and that's what I was,
Some wording in there,
So I think what my idea would be to reach out to the state and see if they can provide someone to come out, meet with us, and kind of educate us on agricultural exemptions. And then the commission will be better able, I guess,
Right.
to address the situation. That's, as well as contacting Mr. Zaney, informing him he still needs to come to the meeting. But I think that would be
just so we
the
can
best
ask
thing
this
for
question
us.
of us, hey, we have this farm, we have this. These are our questions. Are we looking at this correctly?
yeah.
I mean, regulations, as we saw from a hearing earlier tonight, there's a lot of interpretations and gray areas. Well, we see it one way, that he might see it another, but who's right? It's up to the people that made the regulations or control the regulations, so. All right, I'm getting off my soapbox here.
All right.
Any other discussions? I carried enough.
Not after that.
All right, emergency certifications, none. Sawtell Ave, what are we looking at here? What is?
So let me, I didn't get a chance to kind of clarify on that one. So when in the wintertime, when I was slow and didn't have much went on in the office, I made an Excel sheet of all the projects in Leominster, which ones were closed out, which ones had open orders and conditions, because it's becoming a huge issue. I have realtors and lawyers calling me weekly, I need a COC tomorrow. which I'm just, I tell them it is what it is. But at the same time, I'd like to avoid that because that adds a lot of unnecessary stress on them, on us. To kind of schedule, get out there, issue an order, a COC for an order that none of us have any experience with. So I developed the Excel sheet, and I went through it. I sent out a bunch of letters just informing people, hey, it's expired or it's about to expire. You need to either ask for an extension or close out the permit. Not really requiring anyone, but just kind of telling them, like, these are the next steps, just so you know, reminders. And Sawtell Ave is kind of by where Dollar General is and Gourmet Donut is. And one of the homeowners received that. She was here tonight. And she pursued the developer, which is Simi, and the contractor, I think it's a contractor or a manager, would be Roger Lucier for the project. So they want to file for a COC, and they want to know what they need to do. So going on the site, there was a wetland replication area that was supposed to be done, and they don't know if it was done or not. The area is wet. It looks like a wetland. When I first started, Mr. Morrow had told me he was going out there and supervising a wetland replication area. He was, taking a look at a wetland replication area. So I mentioned to him, I said, you might want to talk to your consultant because he told me that he had been out there. So they've been in communications. The homeowner wants COC to have, if she wants to have her COC, she doesn't want it to mess up her deed, she doesn't want it to cause problems for her or her neighbors. So she's been kind of pursuing them. And pursuing me as well. So I had sent Matt an email saying, because he told me he would have an update for the meeting. I said, hey, do you have an update for the meeting? And as you know, he will have a better update for next week so that they can kind of know the next steps. Just one of the side projects I'm working on. I just wanted to update the commission on it because I thought I'd have an update.
Now, is this Sawtell, and I do remember the sidewalk, and it's at the top of the hill, and it's flat, and all this other fun stuff. Anyways, I don't remember replication areas, but that's not to say that didn't exist. But is it for just a property, or is it for that whole development in that?
So it's for the roadway.
For the roadway.
So that's independent of all the houses?
But it's on a different lot, and so the way it was...
Oh, so if it's on one of the
Yeah, it was
lots.
on the lot. So they're working on clearing it up. It's a process because I think not that they forgot about it, but I think they built the houses, sold the houses,
Is
moved
the
on.
roadway approved by the city?
I believe they're working on getting it accepted.
So we need to make sure that
That
it doesn't
everything's
get
done.
accepted.
Yes, I need to work, that's another part of this whole, I don't want to say this, but this whole project, that's kind of one of my side projects. Unfortunately, because we've had such a busy summer, it's kind of been backburnered because it's not enforcement, it's not a NOI, and they are working on it. So I just wanted to add other project updates.
Can I ask a non-conservation question?
I guess.
If it's not an accepted city road, does the city plow that?
So for safety reasons, the city will plow unaccepted roads. They have to in case someone gets in a car accident, emergency vehicles need to get through. And there are other, so the way Sawtell Road goes, it goes through and then it connects to Gamache, like the chocolate stuff road. That's what it reminds me of. So it connects through that way.
Yes.
And there is, there's a senior assisted living home on that end. So they do plow all unaccepted streets for safety reasons. They don't accept it though.
And I think they use
So
trash.
what's the advantage
Yeah, they
to
do
getting it
trash.
accepted they won't pave it, right?
They just won't
Yeah,
pave
they
it,
just don't
right?
maintain it.
They don't maintain it, they won't
It's
take care of it, they won't
accepted.
put sidewalks on it,
All
they
they
won't
do
do
is-
the lights.
Yeah.
That's
They run-
correct.
yeah.
All they do is plow it and pick up trash, that's it.
And if there's ever like an issue, for example, a tree, is
Correct.
uprooting the sidewalk,
potholes and
exactly, they don't want to do it. So it is in their best interest to have it accepted, but the city absolutely does not leave residents hanging when it comes to safety.
Right.
Do you just want me to go down the list of updates?
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be easier. So 1145 Central Street, this is Mr. Bolio's project. I don't know if you guys all remember. Okay. So they've completed the work. I went out there, JJ Harrington from Earth Solutions completed a couple weeks ago, and they're working on getting the as-built and the COC. I believe Hannigan Engineering is doing it, but it's just been kind of, there's a lot going on right now, so it's just kind of in the works. 392 Central Street, I visited the site to check out the wetland replication area. That was the car dealership that Whittam and Bingham have represented with Mr. Assad. The wetland replication area was completed last year. It's growing in really well. It's flourishing. All the boulders are in place.
They're big.
They're big.
They're big.
They're very big.
You drive by Central Street.
I
and see
approved
them.
them. Remember that was the rule I had to approve them.
Angie tried to move them and she couldn't pick them up.
Yeah,
so.
I'm pretty strong. So that one's chugging along as well. I do know he wanted to kind of close it out, and I explained to him that you have the 2 years, then you file for your certificate of compliance. But I'm keeping an eye on that one. And then for Old Tavern Road, Mr. Morrow was originally going to be the wetland scientist for this project. If you guys remember, 138 Old Tavern Road is where Mr. Karuki has the house, the roadway. He had a huge enforcement issue. All the silt and dirt is in the wetlands, needs to be removed. It's on the neighboring property as well. He I guess was in an agreement to work with Mr. Morrow. Mr. Morrow had been reaching out to me, giving me updates on the meetings. But unfortunately there was an issue, and Mr. Morrow has decided not to represent him. So I reached out to Mr. Karuki to kind of find out where he is, because this, even though now they have an NOI, I still believe the commission could reissue an enforcement order because he hasn't done any.
I remember that. Is Whitman and Bingham still his engineer?
That was the engineering. That was the engineering firm he was using for the NOI and the COC. I have been approached by numerous contractors that want to do work there, and I've turned them all away and told them I cannot meet with you until this is done, until I hear from the wetland scientists. I cannot do an erosion control inspection. I will not.
Because we requested the application area be done first.
So I've been going out there monthly just to kind of take a look at the site and make sure everything's stable. But right now it's at a standstill, and I will be reaching out to Mr. Karuki and trying to figure out, maybe even that Whitman and Bingham, and seeing where everything is.
Okay.
And those are my updates.
All right.
And no budget.
And no budget.
Don't have that.
Okay. Our next meeting is Tuesday, September 24th, and filing deadline was last Friday. Anything else anybody would like to discuss?
That's it.
And with that, I declare this meeting adjourned.